It's definitely changed my body style.
Yeah, me too.
My
Says we're
God,
live.
unreal.
Went out with
How
my
we doing,
wife for the
John?
first time.
How we
Go
doing,
ahead,
John?
John.
Are we close? We're recording. I'm just waiting for your cue, John, to get started here. John, I just got a message from a band director saying YouTube stream is good, so like we're good to go.
I don't think John is hearing you for some reason.
I don't think so either.
Oh gosh, Harry.
My screen says he's not muted.
I think, Tim, I think we're good to go on.
We're good to go? Can you hear me? George, can you hear me?
On the YouTube live. Yeah, let me turn that off though, because it's, I can, yeah.
You can hear me, okay.
John, did you send an email about a link to the YouTube, but I missed that one?
He sent it out this morning.
Okay.
I'm a little
Is
concerned
there a
that,
link to the document?
yeah, it's in the email that John sent out.
Okay.
I'm a little concerned that John can't hear us. John, do you hear us?
I think he's trying to listen to the YouTube stream and then can't hear us live.
Gotcha.
Maybe.
There's a little bit of delay, but it's not that much. If you monitor the YouTube.
John, do you hear me? Cannot hear you, John. Do you hear me? I'm not sure how to proceed here until we have our executive director join us here. I'll tell you what I'm going to do to save a little bit of time. I'm assuming that the rest of you can hear me. Beth, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Mike Arthur, I see you joined us. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and do roll call just to save a little bit of time. And hopefully John can join us here shortly. So I'll go ahead and get started if nobody has any objections. So we're glad you're here this morning.
So you guys can't hear me?
I can now.
I can't hear you either.
Hear you.
I don't know what's going on.
We can hear you, but apparently you can't hear us. Okay. I'm going to go ahead with roll call. I sent John a chat saying that we can hear him, but he can't hear us. Hopefully he'll be able to join us. So if you would, for roll call, let's start off. I will say your district number, and if you would just recite your name. District 1,
Beth Stribling.
District 2,
Corey Mullins.
District 3,
Grant Jones.
District 4, District 4, Brian Ellis. Let's see when I'm getting a message on my phone from Brian. It says, I'm here, just having connection problems. Okay. District 5,
Patrick Brady, excuse me, I'm sorry.
wake up, Patrick. District 6,
Austin Brawley.
District 7,
Michael Stone.
District 8,
Jenny Hipple.
District 9,
Pauletta Smith.
District 10, District 10, Curtis Irvin, are you here? I'm trying to see if he is on the participants list here.
Yeah. Can you hear me now, Tim?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, bingo.
I hope so. I don't see Curtis.
And I see Brian has joined us now. Can you hear me, Brian?
I can, yes.
Good. We went ahead and called roll, John. I got up to District 10 and didn't get a reply from Curtis. District 11, District 12.
Mike Arthur.
So we have everybody accounted for except Curtis. Okay to proceed, John?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sounds like we have everybody in contact now, and we have our YouTube stream going. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Best
Okay.
I can tell.
All right. To those of you that are out there watching, welcome as well.
Also, Tim, I'm recording it. I'm recording recording it to my computer anyhow. So as I mentioned in my email to the directors, if for some reason it fails, I should be able to upload that later. So regardless, they can see it delayed if, that's the thought.
Okay. Very good. Very good. The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda of today's agenda. Hopefully you've had a chance to look over it. It's very short in written form, but plenty to discuss. Is there a motion to approve today's
So moved.
agenda? Beth Stribling, have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Who is that?
Michael Stone.
Michael Stone. Okay. So Stribling and Stone. Any opposed? I think the way we do this is, for the sake of teleconferencing, is unless there's opposition, it will pass. So any opposition to the approval of the agenda? Hearing none, it's approved. Next, approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was on May 9th. You were sent a link to the minutes. And again, hopefully you have reviewed that. I will welcome a motion to accept the minutes from May 9th.
I make the motion, accept the minutes. Pauletta.
Pauletta,
I'll
motion.
second.
And is that Beth? Is that you?
Yes, it is.
Just want to say up front, and in case you've forgotten, I don't always see everybody, and it kind of goes in and out. I can see usually those that are talking, but sometimes it doesn't come in. So if I don't recognize you, I may need some help from John.
Here
or
comes
others.
Curtis.
All right, good deal. So are any objections to accepting the minutes, approving the minutes from May 9th? Hearing none, it passes as well. All right. Moving on. For my report, it's more of a description of what we're going to be doing today. This marks our third meeting now in 3 months for the Marching Band Committee as we try to make some headway into dealing with our unusual circumstances. At our last meeting in May, it was the consensus of the group to be proactive and advocate for our activity to continue this fall. It was also felt that action needed to take place sooner rather than later, so that we don't get pushed aside without a voice as decisions are being made. So to help this process along, an ad hoc committee was formed. And this committee was made up of myself, Dr. Strobe, George Bolden, Joe Craig, Mark Monroe. Mark, you're here, aren't you? Are you here too?
He
I
is.
think Mark. Okay, Mark is here too, and also Austin Brawley. And it was our charge, if you will, to provide and propose a guidance document for Kentucky band directors so that they might communicate better with their own administrators on how to return to marching band. The plan is also to share this document with the governor and the commissioner of education. The guidance document uses the NFSH, which is the National Federation of State High Schools Association, I believe. It uses that as a template, and we've integrated language from KHSAA and the governor's guidance for youth sports and activities, as well as guidelines from the CDC and the White House report. So the bulk of our agenda today is to go through this document to get the committee's suggestions for improvement. This is as John put it, a rolling document, and it may change as new information comes in from health and government officials. Our hope is to release this, if possible, early next week. So I'll leave it at that for right now, and we'll listen to reports from George and John, and then we'll get into one item of unfinished business and then move on into the new business for the day. George, do you have any more to report in terms of judges?
George's connection seems to be gone, Tim. He's
Again, yeah.
Okay.
He took off.
All right. I'll turn it over to Dr. Strobe then.
I don't have much else to say except that I did send an email to a contact in the governor's office and also to the commissioner of education. And just this morning, I got a response from someone in the Department of Education that he had forwarded it to, who was interested in what we have to offer and appreciated our proactive approach to trying to make sure that students are safe, and asked me that once our document is ready for sharing, to give it to her, and they would like to link it. The other part too is that Julian Tackett, who's the commissioner of the Kentucky High School Athletic Association, got in touch the other day by email to say that in calls that he'd been on, I think it was the superintendent meeting. See, he's on two things last week. He did his own meeting with superintendents, and then he was on a guest of the Commissioner of Education to try and answer some questions too. And I think in both cases, marching band came up. People are wanting to know, administrators are wanting to know, what kind of guidance there is. And Julian, in fact, mentioned me. He said that we had communicated, and that what he offered to me by email was that when we have something ready to share, if I wanted him to, he would send it to the superintendents. You see, KHSAA, as you know, is an organization of schools. So he has a direct line of communication with administrators, whereas we're members and we're indirect. So we'll send it to the members. They'll send it up to their principal, and I'll send it to Julian. He'll send it down to the superintendent. So it won't be a secret, what we're settling on and what we're doing. I did have a talk with some band directors last night, and we kind of talked it through. It's kind of good for me because it gave me a little a dry run a little bit on some of this. We have to be on the one hand, we're pushed by what we want and what we want to be able to do. And I'm sure there's probably a band director or two that says, just this whole thing's a hoax. Just tell them to let us do our regular stuff and everything will be fine. And then, you know, there's other people that say, oh, it's too dangerous and we shouldn't really probably do anything or even go back to school. Somewhere in the middle has got to be the truth. And I think that what we have to do is take CDC guidelines and insert the proper language that makes it fit for marching band. Things that when it says coach, it needs to say director. And, you know, when it says one thing, we have to then say, okay, if they say this, then that's how it would transfer, and try to take out the potential minimalistic interpretation. And that's what directors don't want. They don't want their principal to say, well, you just can't do anything because blowing in your trumpet could make the whole band sick. Well, we don't know very much about that, and it's going to be about another month before we do, because of this aerosol study. And that's referenced in this document today, that the aerosol study is underway. And once we know more, we'll be able to say with some proof, this is dangerous unless you get this far apart, or it's not as dangerous as everybody thinks. That's what we hope, but we don't know. And whatever the truth is has to be the truth, and we have to go with it, because people's health is at stake. That's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Strobe. All right, we're ready to move into unfinished business. There's only one or two items on that.
George is back, by the way. I'm sorry to interrupt. George is back, by the way. George, did you have something to say about judge coordination? You have to unmute.
Yes. No, we're John and I have actually been trying to wrap things on this. I don't know if I mentioned this the last meeting, but you would think people would answer emails this time because they got nothing else to do. But in fact, not the case. So we're 2 or 3, I think, from being done, right, John? Is that your math, my math?
Right.
We do this. I do this independent of John, and then we put our forces together to try to fill the void. So last week we've hired probably what, 8 total or so.
Yeah,
or
maybe. Yeah, getting really close.
So we're feeling really good. I'm feeling really good. And fortunately, some people who had not considered, because I thought they were going to be unavailable, are available. So that's a good thing for us, and that we've not had before. So nice. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, George. So back to unfinished business. At our last meeting, we did decide for 2020 only, to eliminate the minimum show time requirement during the first 2 weeks of the season. And then we decided the weeks following that, in the third week, there's a 3-minute minimum, the fourth week, a 4-minute minimum, the fifth week, a 5-minute minimum through the championships. And we kept the cap at 10 minutes on top, I believe. So 5 to 10 by the end of the season. We also discussed the idea of possibly changing the sheets to reflect more weight in music and less on visual. At that meeting, there was really no consensus. In fact, some of the reaction was a little bit lukewarm. Others were thought it might be a good idea. So we decided to send that back to districts to get feedback. So at this time, if anybody would like to, the floor is open for discussion. If anybody would like to address that or comment on that idea. It's not something that we have to do. It was just, we took this from a page of the Indiana music educators, and they are doing this. And I just thought I would throw that in there to see if that's something that we wanted to do. So the floor is open for discussion. Jump in there anytime now. Okay. Nobody has anything to say about it. As I said at our last meeting, I think the majority were a little bit lukewarm to the idea. A lot of discussion of not necessary to do this. So there's not any discussion. This was really not in the form of a motion earlier, it was just a discussion item. Would someone like to say or come forward and say, we don't need to consider this? Or would somebody like to come forward and say, we do need to consider this? If I don't hear someone coming forward, I will assume that the point is moot and we will not address it.
That
Doing a
makes sense.
countdown. Doing a countdown here.
Going once.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to discuss it.
All right. We have a second not to discuss it.
I second not discussing it. It's Mike Arthur.
All right. Hearing no objection to that, we'll eliminate that as a point of discussion. All right. We are ready for new business. And as I mentioned in my report, the bulk of our work today is to go through this document that our ad hoc committee has fashioned for you to look at. So I have a technology question here, John. If can folks here go ahead and click on the link and view that on their own screen as we talk through this, or does it have to be on a separate screen? Can we still see them when they talk?
If they click on it and bring it up on their own screen, that'll probably block their view of everybody else. But anybody who's looking at the view of everyone should be able to see them. It shouldn't affect the audio. So that's probably a good way to do it. The link is in the agenda, and I also put the link in the chat a little bit ago. If people want to find that and bring that up and be looking at it.
Okay, yeah, I think it would be an excellent idea, and it probably should happen. If you haven't got this up on your screen or somewhere where you can see it, you need to. Our ad hoc committee met, when did we meet, guys? Tuesday of this? No, it was Friday of last week. When did we meet?
Monday.
Monday. Thank you, Austin. We met Monday of this week and spent the better part of a day crafting this document. And as I mentioned before, it's going to change, but we do need to go through this document. It'll be a little bit tedious at times, but I think it's very, very important that knowing that we're going to send this to directors and to the governor and the commissioner of education, we need your input as far as maybe some suggestions and additions and tweaking. But again, this is what this document is about. It is not a cure-all for fixing all the problems that we have with marching band and the challenges that we have. But it is, again, a set of guidelines that hopefully we can use to help band directors guide their direction as they prepare for the upcoming season. So if you haven't got the document in front of you, you need to. Again, this was, we used the NFHS as a template for this. So I'm looking at the very first page, and this is really an introduction that explains our mission and why we're doing this. I guess, John and others, it would probably be best to read through this. Would you agree?
Yes, I think so too.
Okay. All right. Because you may see some wording that may need to be changed, and you may disagree in some of the things that we mentioned here. So this is from the Kentucky Music Educators Association. The COVID-19 pandemic presents schools with a myriad of challenges. KMA offers this document as guidance on how schools can consider approaching the many components of returning to high school marching band activities across the United States. KMEA believes it is essential to the physical and mental well-being of high school students to return to physical activity and activity participation. KMEA recognizes that it is likely that all students will not be able to return to and sustain activity at the same time in all schools. There will also likely be variation in what activities can be held. While we would typically have reservations regarding such inequities, KMEA endorses the idea of returning students to school-based athletics and activities in any in all situations where it can be done safely. KMEA is a well-respected voice for music education issues, and it has established a goal to engage with state and local health departments to develop policy regarding coordinated approaches for return to activities for high school marching bands. The recommendations presented in this document are intended as ideas for schools to consider with their respective marching band directors in designing return to activity guidelines that will be in accordance with state or local restrictions. Please note that the phases outlined below, and there are 3 phases, these phases are based upon the White House document released in April of 2020. Also, you need to consult your state and local health departments to review if they are using a similar approach or how the phases in this document correspond to your state or local government's nomenclature. For the periods defined within any published order of the Governor of Kentucky during this pandemic, all KMEA guidelines must not contradict and shall be congruent with such orders. The next topic is the importance of restarting marching band activities to the well-being of children. First bullet, KMEA believes it is essential to the physical and mental well-being of students to return to physical activity and athletic competition. KMEA recognizes that all Kentucky students may be unable to return to and sustain marching band activity at the same time across the state. While recognizing that district-to-district reopening may lead to perceived inequities, this is kind of redundant, isn't it? We might need to rethink this. KMEA advocates for returning students to school-based marching band activities. Even more important is the strong relationship that exists between most players and their band directors, a relationship that likely has never been more important to both the athlete and the coach in light of this pandemic. Not sure if we need to address those words, athlete and coach. The band director is integral in monitoring the health and well-being of all participants. And band directors are in a unique position to help determine if additional guidance or alternate steps are needed to ensure each participant begins the process of recovery from physical, mental, psychological, and other aspects of this pandemic. I'm going to go one more topic, and then we'll if anybody has anything they want to maybe interject, they can. Considerations for the fall. Due to the near certainty of recurrent outbreaks in the coming months, schools must be prepared for periodic school closures and the possibility of some marching bands having to isolate for 2 or more weeks while in season. We address this a little bit later on in the document as well. So I'm going to just stop there for a minute to see if anybody has input on what's been said so far in the document.
I've just replaced athlete and coach with student and teacher. I don't know why we didn't see that the other day.
Yeah, that needs to be changed. Yeah, a big part of what we did the other day was a lot of editing and rewording to accommodate our needs. Okay, so we got that taken care of. Anybody else?
In that same paragraph, you might substitute players, put students instead of players there, just to keep our guard people included.
Right, or participants. You use participants in several places, and I like participants.
In place of what word, Beth?
Players.
You
say even more important is the strong relationship that exists between most players. I think it should be participants because they're not all players.
I just replaced the word players with participants.
Okay.
I would go and say performers. That covers everybody.
Sounds more
Sounds good.
artistic too.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? All right, I'm going to move ahead, and if you think of something else that we need to come back to, we can always do that. I am down to a topic a heading called Points of Emphasis. Under number 1, attendance at practices and rehearsals must be optional for students and in compliance with the rules of summer marching band practices and rehearsals. In addition to on-campus options, schools should consider providing students guidance for practicing at home or remotely away from school. This can include virtual practices, emailed or otherwise electronically delivered practice instructions, or any delivery model approved by the local school district. Decreasing potential exposure to respiratory droplets is the guiding principle behind social distancing and the use of face coverings. The use of cloth face coverings is meant to decrease the spread of respiratory droplets. As state and local COVID-19 prevalence decreases, the need for strict social distancing and the use of face coverings will lessen. Look to guidance from the state and local health departments. And you see under A, the CDC is additionally advising the use of simple cloth face coverings to slow the spread of the virus and help people who may have the virus and do not know it from transmitting it to others. Under B, recognizing the benefits and potential drawbacks of the use of cloth face coverings during conditioning and physical activity, KMEA recommends the following. State, local, or school district guidelines for cloth face coverings should be strictly followed. Cloth face coverings should be considered acceptable. There is no need to require or recommend medical grade masks for marching band activity. Physical respiratory protection, such as a cloth face covering, should be worn whenever people are within 6 feet of each other because A, COVID-19 is spread through respiratory droplets, and B, a significant number of infected people will show no outward symptoms of illness. In order to ensure maximum comprehension and compliance, signage posted throughout the venue should show how to wear and use a mask covering, including these points. Masks should be labeled with the student's name and kept separate, such as a Ziploc bag. We took a tip from Austin Briley. He's already come up with a document for his summer rehearsal schedule, and part of that included labeling Ziploc bags and having the students keep their mask in there to keep track of them, which was a great idea. So we included that in there as well as a suggestion. Consider having masks available to give to students who do not arrive with their own. Wash your hands before putting on a face covering. Put the same side against your face each time to avoid wearing the contaminated side against your nose and mouth. Remove your face covering using the straps to avoid touching the part that protects your face. Excuse me. Wash each cloth face covering after each use and wear other masks only according to the manufacturer's specifications and limitations. Any student who prefers to wear a cloth face covering during a rehearsal, performance, or contest should be allowed to do so. In the absence of guidelines to the contrary, we recommend that cloth face coverings be worn by students during phases 1 and 2 as outlined below. Cloth face coverings may continue to be used during phase 3 when not engaged in vigorous activity. Under E, plastic shields covering the entire face shall not be allowed during rehearsals and contests. Their use during marching band training or performance increases the risk of unintended injury to the person wearing the shield or other band members. Directors, adjudicators, and other personnel may wear cloth face coverings at all times during phases 1 through 3. May wear. 3. Testing regimens, specific guidelines regarding mass gatherings and response to a student or team member. I guess team member is okay. Testing positive. Let me start that again. Testing regimen, specific guidelines regarding mass gatherings and response to a student or team member testing positive for COVID-19, including contact tracing are all currently under review, and guidance will come from the CDC and the state and local health departments. Limited testing availability, lack of resources for contact tracing, and expanding knowledge of the characteristics of COVID-19's transmission could all result in significant changes to the recommendations below. The NFHC, SMAC, and State Association SMACs expect to disseminate this information as it becomes available. Okay. Due to, and I'm about to finish up under this heading, and then we'll open it up for discussion. I'm on number 5 now. With the uncertainty of which phase will be attained at the beginning of the season or maintained during the season, band directors should consider selecting contests that require less travel when possible to reduce the time spent in buses or vans. It will also potentially decrease the likelihood of facing a cancellation, as opening up may occur regionally. In other words, if any participating bands at the time of a contest are subject to greater restrictions, the contest is likely to proceed without bands that cannot attend. Number 6 defines what vulnerable individuals are. And that term, vulnerable individuals, comes up a few times in the document. Vulnerable individuals are defined by CDC as people age 65 years or older, people with serious underlying health conditions, including high blood pressure, chronic lung disease, diabetes, obesity, asthma, and people whose immune systems are compromised, such as by chemotherapy for cancer and other conditions requiring such therapy. So that term, vulnerable individuals, will come up a couple more times in this document. And then finally, number 7 under this, until a cure, vaccine, or very effective treatment is readily available, or so-called herd immunity is confidently reached, social distancing and other preventive measures such as a face covering will be necessary if workouts, rehearsals, and contests are to continue. So everything I just mentioned there all falls under considerations for the fall and points of emphasis. So any interjections from the peanut gallery, from the marching band committee on this?
Tim, when you mentioned the thing where it said team, that did perk my ears up. It's up in number 3, testing regimens, specific guidelines regarding mass gatherings and response to a student or team member. Well, that really is not, as you quickly, on the fly realize that's really not our terminology. Do we want to say band member? Or is that quite right? Response to student or band member? I mean, that's the same thing. Do we even need that? Do we just say?
Do we also need to say something about possibly a staff member? I mean, I know we're addressing the students, but in response to a student or staff member testing positive.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised it didn't say that in the first place. Maybe if it said to a student or staff member, and then you've got them all covered.
We do address that later on in the document, but I think it would be good to put that in here as well.
Just say staff instead of team. I don't know why they didn't. It kind of seems like maybe that's kind of what they were going for and they missed it.
Hey, John, we should also include volunteer as well, because we know they're around the kids as much as the staff are, especially in the summer.
Okay. I'm getting it.
Well, John is inputting information. Anything else from anybody in this section?
Back up a little bit under B5. Put the same side of the mask or of the covering against your face. Just clean that up just a little.
Good call.
And then also the spot where we added the Ziploc bag when we talked about that on Monday, I think that's kind of in an awkward spot because it it says including these points, and then it talks about the masks, and then it goes on to the points that they're wanting to discuss. So maybe we either make that a point or move it to a different spot, but it kind of throws off the flow in my mind.
I think you're right.
Yep.
Where should we put that?
Should that be along with number 3, right below it? Consider having masks available to give students who do not drive their own. And then put masks should be labeled. Is that a good place for it? Or
Yeah, or make it its own Roman numeral, possibly.
Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah. Johnny
Maybe
suggestions?
make it a little bit broader. Say like directors should prepare to have labeled materials available for each student or performer, whatever we're going to call. Plastic gloves might be a part of it too.
I think gloves is a great addition. My question is, has been putting them in baggies been approved as a way to store them by the CDC? I would just think that if there is some contamination, that being in a bag would help that grow more.
It's the virus.
I can tell you that at my wife's hospital, the masks that the staff, the medical professionals there, they store those in a plastic bag.
Okay.
So I think if the hospitals are doing it, I'm sure it's fine for us.
Yeah. So the document that my group put together, and I can't take credit for it at all. We have about 4 or 5 parents who are medical research specialists, and they're the ones who put the document together. So I can't take credit for it at all, but that was one of their recommendations.
Ideally, we should all have a UV machine that just sanitizes everything. Kids too, they just walk through it and we don't have to worry about a thing. Maybe one day.
Like
What
the
else?
big black guys, they just flash that in front of your face and boom, everything's good.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
How do we
Good.
like
What
this,
else?
David? The new number 3, David, do you think that covers your idea about school provided, I don't know, bags or whatever?
I do. I think maybe masks and possibly other materials just to cover us a little bit.
Or other face coverings?
Or gloves.
We could use the phrase PPE.
Yeah.
There, yes.
And also when I know when they were developing it, the idea and the intent was for the students to have their own Ziploc bags that they keep with their personal items. So when their face mask is away from their body, they have it in a place where it's not going to get confused with anybody else's. So if they take it off, it's not getting confused with somebody else in their section. So I don't know if we want to add that, but that was the original intent of the Ziploc bag.
Do we need to define PPE earlier in the document?
I'm thinking that in this day and age, most everybody knows what PPE stands for.
Yeah, I think so too. It's become common parlance as of March 15th.
Okay. Are you happy with that?
Quick question. I had someone send me a message and ask, I might have missed it, but does it address anywhere in there if a student has a family member that tests positive?
I think that's in the questionnaire, Michael. In Appendix 1. Let me at the very bottom. Let's see, what does it say? I know it's one of our questions at the office. Close contact or cared for someone with COVID-19. So it does ask it does ask the student to report if they're having that close contact.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's the only place I think it exists in this, in these guidelines.
Okay.
I think.
Just wanted to check.
No, it's exactly right.
John, I want to interrupt. I'm getting a couple texts from band directors that are watching this on YouTube.
Yeah.
Are they allowed to ask questions
Sure.
and post it on here?
They can put questions in, I don't know. I don't know how well we can keep up. I mean, if somebody on the committee who has that link wants to keep track of that. I know I'm, juggling 2 or 3 things, and I can't likely watch that myself,
Okay.
But
I think that's wise too.
If somebody's doing that and says, look, somebody's inquiring minds want to know this,
John, I've
address
got
it
on the screen on YouTube. I can go over to that, watch that screen for questions.
Yeah,
That'd be
sure.
appropriate. And I can type them in chat on this screen. That might work.
That might work. Again, somebody will have to say them out loud because my screen's pretty well taken up most of the time with the document.
Okay, well, I'll copy the question, post it to our chat, and then we all get it. So it's
yeah, somebody will see it.
Somebody will look at it. Okay, so I'll be there.
Yeah, that's good. Now, many minds, many, the hive mind is really helpful and stuff like this.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you, George. All right. Did we get that cleared up as far as the Ziploc bags? Does that look good to you? Number 3, directors should be prepared to provide a means to label all PPE with the student's name and keep them separate, such as in a Ziploc bag. This is to avoid confusion as to whose items are whose. Everybody okay with that? All right. Anything else in this section?
I just got a question from a director in my district. What about, we didn't address, what about students who have to share instruments?
Like what?
Well, I know it's not marching band, but most middle schools, a lot of times some students share instruments. They don't share mouthpieces, but they do share instruments to address that. With percussion instruments, they switch between marimba, xylophone, other, have every student need to have sticks, just something to think about.
That's addressed on page 8.
Part of it is the part about sharing wind instruments. Woodwinds or brass is not in this document because, of course, in marching band everybody's got his own horn, that sort of thing. So, and this is strictly marching band. We do have to progress in the coming weeks to in-class stuff, which does get to that. It's going to get pretty tricky to talk about somebody, 2 kids sharing a baritone saxophone. I mean, think of all the surfaces. That's outside today's thing. So we probably don't want to get, bunny trailed on that. I know you figure if somebody just blew their viruses into a baritone or tuba, and the next class comes in and that kid inhales through the horn, who's going to catch it? So that could be really, really tricky during this particular time. That's my guess. That's really something to attend to kind of in the next phase of our guidance document.
All right. Are we ready to move on? Anything else in this section? All right. I'm looking at the document on page 4, bottom of page 4, and under areas to address, and the first heading is administrative. Conduct of conditioning and rehearsal sessions. Conduct of conditioning and rehearsal sessions. Consider having an individual wholly or partially dedicated to ensuring protocols described in these guidelines are being successfully implemented and followed. So in other words, have someone there that is overseeing to make sure that regulations are being followed. The phases that we're about to get into, the phases are in accordance with the guidelines published by the White House and the CDC, and there's a link to that in the document. Please consult your local or state health department regarding their plan for opening up your community or Kentucky, respectively. Use the following as a resource and design a plan for your band program. Please note that there will be gating criteria to establish phase 1, and that further criteria must be met to advance from one phase to the next. These criteria will be determined by state and or local governments and must be strictly followed. I think that has to do with are the hospitals in your area available and big enough to handle infections, and what is the infection rate? I think that's the gating process there.
Now that is pretty jargon-esque, and every time I get to it, I have to rethink it all through. I'm not real sure myself. I'm going to put that in red and try to find out more, just to remind myself to find out more about that, because there may be a way to put that in everyman language that's not, not quite like it is, but we can meet the spirit of it after, later.
Okay. All right. So now we're about to get into the meat of the document, and it describes what happens within each phase. Well, I pulled a fast one on Dr. Strobel last night. I called him about 10 o'clock and I said he had reformatted it quite a bit according to our wishes from our last meeting. And I was really struggling with it. And long story short, I don't know when you did this, John. It had to be this morning because I didn't go to bed till after midnight and it had been done then. So you must have gotten up early this morning and done this. But in any case, yeah. Now I see the bags under your eyes now. So that explains it. But in any case, this has been reformatted to make it a little bit more user-friendly in terms of if a band director needs to know what's going to take place during phase 1, this is what happens, and phase 2 and phase 3 and so on. The first thing you'll notice is that the 3 phases are set aside by dates. And so phase 1 are the recommendations for June 15th through June 28th. That's 10 days from now, starting 10 days from now. Phase 2 goes June 29th through July 12th. And phase 3 is after July 12th.
The date needs to be corrected on the next line. The next line and to June 29.
Say it one more time, David.
The date, he's catching it. It said July 15th. You got it, yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So under each phase, there is a pre-rehearsal screening that is being suggested. We've condensed this to where when there are some things that carry over that are the same for each phase, we've tried to condense that into just a few bullets that takes care of all phases. So under pre-rehearsal screening for phases 1 and 2, these are grouped together. Bullet 1, every day, all adults and students should be screened for signs, symptoms of COVID-19 prior to a rehearsal. Screening includes a temperature check using a school-supplied touch-free thermometer. Anyone with a temperature of 100.4 degrees or higher should not participate and be sent home. Okay, school-supplied touch-free thermometer. I'm sure that probably some of you right now, if you've been able to go into your school, I know that at Lindsey Wilson, I have to get a temperature check every day. I have to answer some questions before I can even go in. So this is the part of the pre-rehearsal screening process. Bullet 2, and I'll go through these 4 bullets, and then if we want to address it, we can. Bullet number 2, responses to screening questions for each person's each person should be recorded and stored so that there is a record of everyone present in case a student develops COVID-19, with appropriate attention being given to privacy and confidentiality. And there is, as John alluded to before, there is at the end of this document, there's an appendix that has a suggested monitoring form with, I think it has 8 or 9 questions on it. Maybe less than that, maybe it's 5 or 6. Bullet number 3 under pre-rehearsal screening. Any person with positive symptoms reported who cannot transport themselves home should be immediately quarantined until a parent or guardian picks them up. They should not be allowed to take part in rehearsals, and they should contact their primary care provider or other appropriate healthcare professionals. And then the final under pre-rehearsal screening for phase 1 and 2 says vulnerable individuals. If you remember, we defined what a vulnerable individual was. Vulnerable individuals should not oversee or participate in any rehearsals during phases 1 or 2. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and add phase 3 on this before we discuss any further on this. For phase 3, and that's after July 12th now. Phase 3 is after July 12th. There are 3 more bullets that are very similar but are added in here for screening. And the first one is a record should be kept of all individuals present. Second bullet, any person who has had a fever or cold symptoms in the previous 24 hours should not be allowed to take part in rehearsals, and they should contact their primary care provider or other appropriate healthcare professional. And then again, vulnerable individuals can resume public interactions. This is under phase 3 now. Vulnerable individuals can resume public interaction, but should practice physical distancing, minimizing social settings where distancing may not be practical and precautionary measures are observed. Okay, so under 1 and 2, we went through for screening before rehearsal starts. Comments? Suggestions? Are you saying we did good?
Everybody's looking pretty quiet.
Well, maybe they're still trying to take it all in.
Oh, there is that.
Okay, that was, and then under phase 3, pre-rehearsal screening, the things that we added there.
Hey, Tim, we might want to consider adding a bullet point there, maybe like a sub point that that the screening for every student and adult does not need to continue in phase 3, because that might be confusing. It does say records should be kept, but it doesn't say it's been eliminated. Does that make sense? I don't know if that's something we want to mention, just to kind of clear that up.
That might be a first bullet point, that pre-rehearsal screening does not need to take place. In fact, do we need to clarify in that regard?
It's an interesting question because the idea of it is, that since we split it up, the 2 that are identical, phases 1 and 2, say what goes on, and 3 is not in addition to the above these things. It's just in replacement of the above. So I get what he's saying. We don't want it to be open for interpretation.
Yeah, so maybe on phase
then where do you stop?
Yeah.
What are you thinking, Austin? Sorry.
I was going to say maybe in phase 3, you say that these 3 steps replace the ones listed above. I don't know how, you'd have to reword and think about how that sounds. but it almost looks like these are in addition to, like you said, and I don't want people to interpret it that way. So it's not these 4 things plus these 3 things in phase 3. It's these 3 things replace the first 4. I mean, I understand that, but I'm not sure if somebody just looking through the document the first time. Yeah, that might work, replacing the above.
Let's let that ride and let it settle in, and maybe somebody out there in YouTube land has a, you know, a little rewording, but that gets to your point. Now, it's not a bad point.
George has put up a question from Stephen Bishop. You want to look at your chat?
Yeah, I see that, Terry, and I actually have in my notes today to be part of discussions at the end of talking about this document. I have 2 or 3 points that I want to make, and I'm looking
up
at a different one now from Steve. Okay, so comments talking about this document. Sorry, I was looking at the previous one. From employee doing the pre-rehearsal screening, not a band parent, in exclamation point. We did talk about that. That it should not be a student that would be taking temperatures and did we not talk about that? Did we mention?
We did something like that. If you have a medical professional among your band parents,
says so should it be a school employee?
Wow.
We did definitely say not students.
On page 4, under administrative, first paragraph, consider having an individual wholly or partially dedicated to ensuring that protocols described.
That's true.
Consider having a school employee wholly or partially dedicated, or
it seems like there could be exceptions to that would still be credible.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, if you have a band parent who's a,
medical professional,
nurse practitioner, or a medical practitioner of some sort, that person would certainly be qualified, and you'd be able to believe them that they're going to, stick by their guns because they have a professional ethics to uphold.
Yeah, but how do you mandate that?
Well, we don't.
A school employee or a health worker?
I would suggest that this is one of those local decisions.
I agree.
Yeah, and this whole document is not a mandate, of course. This whole document is, what do we call it?
Recommended guidelines.
Recommended guidelines, and all decisions are local. And Julian Tackett says the same thing, that we're, and for the sports things, if a school decides to ignore them, that's at their own peril. But we're not mandating anything because we don't have that authority. We're just trying to help.
So do we want to leave that alone?
I would agree with leaving the language as it is and let it be a local decision.
Okay.
I think that if the language is a concern, to make sure that we clarify it's local, then maybe putting a school approved individual might be the language to use. That way directors know, hey, it's a good idea to check with your administrators and your superintendent before assigning that role to a specific individual.
I think that's a real good suggestion. I totally support that, Jenny.
Yeah, so John, up there under administrative, under conduct of conditioning, consider having a school approved individual. Is that what we decided, Jenny? School approved?
Where, give me a number and a letter and so forth. I can't find it quite yet.
Page 4, bottom of the page.
Oh, okay.
Administrative.
Oh, okay.
Consider having a school approved individual. Is that what you said, Jenny?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good idea.
Like yeah. Everybody good with that? Okay. Anything else under pre-rehearsal screening for phases 1, 2, and 3? Okay, hearing no other input, we'll move ahead. Okay, we're on to the heading of limitations on gatherings for phase 1. So we're talking about strictly phase 1 right now, which is June 15th through June 28th. Bullet 1, consider strategies to prevent groups from gathering at entrances or exits to facilities to limit crossover and contact, including staggering starting and ending times. Now there are about 10 bullets on this, so I'm going to go through them all, and then we'll come back and maybe, I'm sure there's going to be some discussion about 2 or 3 of these. Next bullet, and this is important. This is phase 1. Rehearsals may take place only outdoors. Only outdoors. If weather prevents outdoor rehearsals, rehearsals should be canceled until the weather allows rehearsing outdoors. So as we go through these bullets, always keeping that in mind in phase 1, outdoor rehearsing. Next bullet, schools should devise a plan for care of students if a sudden weather-related danger makes staying outside a danger. Now, we had a pretty lengthy discussion about that. You know, if you're in the middle of a rehearsal outside and you see a storm, electrical storm brewing, well, if we're not allowed to go into the inside as a group, what do we do? And it was a lengthy discussion, but ultimately, I think we just decided to, you know, every school setting and makeup is different. So we decided to leave it as schools should devise a plan for care of students if a sudden weather-related danger makes staying outside a risk. It could be, you know, the heat index gets above a certain point. You've got to take your students somewhere. Where are you going to put them? Or especially if it's weather-related, what do you do? And then what you see, those of you that can see this, if it's in red, the next bullet is in red, and this is kind of a placeholder that we created or John created. We had discussion about restrooms, use of restrooms. You know, do you plan restroom breaks into your rehearsal schedule, and how is that going to work? So restrooms, and then the cleaning of restrooms, and the number of individuals at one time in a restroom. We did not give specific numbers for that or specific instructions for that, and that will probably be dictated here in exact numbers sooner or later. But for right now, it is just a placeholder. John, do you want to expand on that anymore?
Well, I suspect now that this morning I got that email from the woman at the Department of Education who's in charge of this sort of thing. What I can do is after this meeting, I'll email her back and invite her to give me a call, and I'll ask her where she can point me toward any of these things that are in red, and try to put her guidance into words for our use. And she is, I mean, as I said before, she's really pleased that we're doing this, so she'll be on board with the concept, and I expect that she'll be pretty helpful.
Okay. Next bullet. There should be no carpooling to or from rehearsals. No carpooling. Next bullet. Storage and cleaning rooms. Storage and changing rooms should not be utilized. I'll say it one more time. Storage and changing rooms should not be utilized. Except for large instruments that cannot be taken home, students should report to rehearsals in proper attire with their instruments in hand, and at the end of the rehearsal, they should immediately return home, taking their instruments to shower. We might need to reword that a little bit. Taking their instruments to shower is a little bit off-putting there. But in any case,
yeah, well, yeah, I got you. I want to be sure they take their horn home, but that you're right. That doesn't work really well yet. Let me see what I can do about that.
Okay. All right. So this is something that we did add in there. The idea of, we know that most all bands and band rooms make use of larger school instruments, tubas, bass clarinets, whatever. So those would be under the category of large instruments that are not normally taken home. So we do address that they would be able to come into the band room to get that. And I think it comes up here very shortly, to get their instruments and then immediately go out and join the outside rehearsal. Next bullet. There should be, and here it is right here, there should be no gathering of more than 10 people at a time, inside or outside. This is phase 1 now. There should be no gathering of more than 10 people at a time, inside or outside. A group of people working or rehearsing together may be known as a pod. We came up, our ad hoc committee came up with this term pod, and we'll discuss it here in just a minute too. But a pod is a gathering of 10 people or less. We'll use that as our.
I think that was. Yeah, I think that was from the National Federation. Honestly, I think that's where it came from. So that may be even part of their athletics language. That may be kind of universal on this.
Okay, all right. I wasn't aware of that.
What do you think? What do you think about me taking that sentence and putting it as the first part of the next bullet? It doesn't really seem to. In other words, I'll show you what I'm doing here. I'll cut it from there, and I'll put it here. Those two actually go together better, I think.
Okay. So the first bullet then says there should be no gathering of more than 10 people at a time, inside or outside. Next bullet, a group of people working, rehearsing together may be known as a pod. Yeah. Okay, so I'll say that last bullet again, and then we're going to add to that. A group of people working together may be known as a pod. The number of pods allowable on a campus simultaneously will be determined locally. KMEA recommends that pods rehearse with a minimum of 15 yards between them. Now, we'll come back to this. We had a pretty lengthy discussion about this as well. But I'll just leave it at that for right now. We'll come back to that shortly. Let me finish up these bullets. Next bullet, each student should be assigned their own area, a 4 foot by 3 foot square. That's not a square, it's a rectangle. Their own area designated for their case and other equipment. That is their space alone. And finish up these bullets. A 4 by 3 for their case and other equipment. Students should be encouraged to use, whoops, I lost my place. John was editing here. Students should be encouraged to use the center of that space and then move outward as needed. So each student has an assigned area, 4 by 3 foot area for their case and other equipment that is their space alone. Next bullet, rehearsals should be conducted in pods of students with the same students always rehearsing together. This ensures more limited exposure if someone develops an infection. Next bullet, social distancing should be observed when music is being taught. Students should learn and rehearse the music standing still or sitting, spaced at a minimum of 6 foot intervals. If teachers or instructors need to move within the 6 foot area to correct a student's playing position, embouchure, posture, etc., they should do so briefly and then move away. Next to last bullet, students should be spaced by the show designer, drill/drill writer, at a minimum of 3-step intervals for a drill and on-field formations. And we all know that an 8 to 5 step is 22.5 inches per step. So that's close to 6 feet. So 3-step intervals is pretty close to 6 feet. And the last bullet, instruments, equipment, and sheet music should not be shared without proper cleaning and disinfecting, including music stands, drumsticks, and color guard equipment. So that takes care of phase one for limitations on gatherings. There are those change for phase two and for phase three. So let's now go back to phase one under limitations on gatherings. This is phase one, June 15th through the 28th. And we'll open the floor for suggestions or questions.
Okay, Tim,
Beth?
I
Yeah, there
have,
you go.
I have two. The first one is under the storage and cleaning room should not be utilized where we take the instruments to shower with us. I suggest that we say, students should report to rehearsals in proper attire with their instruments in hand and take them home with them when rehearsal concludes, period. And then start a new sentence. At the end of the rehearsal, students or participants should immediately return home to shower and leave out taking their instruments.
And are you suggesting we leave out storage and changing rooms should not be utilized?
No, I just didn't want to read the whole thing.
Oh, okay. All right.
John, I think we start that bullet with the sentence Beth just adjusted, and then add storage and cleaning room should not be utilized except for large instruments. Add all that to the end. Like that makes it a little clearer what we're talking about.
Gotcha.
Probably in that same bullet, we should, instead of instruments, use the word equipment so that color guard.
Good point.
So the point is, I think, take the first sentence and put it at the end, David Graham?
Maybe the first two sentences, yeah.
Oh, the first two.
Add a comma after utilized, lowercase except. Instruments and other equipment that can't be taken home, period. Take
Okay.
that to the end.
Say it again, David Centers.
Not be utilized, comma, lowercase except for large instruments and other equipment that cannot be taken home, period. Then move that first sentence to the end.
Okay. I got you.
Should any of us being required to take a shower immediately after rehearsal be put in a separate section since it has nothing to do with their equipment?
Mm-hmm.
The KHSAA also has that as a bullet. In addition to showering, they also say, and wash rehearsal clothes or practice clothes.
Didn't we say that somewhere?
Is that in there as well?
I remember it. I just don't see it. I remember the existence of that.
I think it's under hygiene a little bit later on in the document, but I wonder if David's right. We need to put that in here too, just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, washing clothes is mentioned on page 8.
This is a good place to add that.
Yeah, there's a bullet point that's actually worded really well that we could just copy. The last bullet under facilities and cleaning.
What page?
On page 8 says students must be encouraged to return home immediately after rehearsal and to shower and wash their rehearsal clothing immediately upon arrival at their home. I think that's, it's already written for us.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to find it.
It's kind
Page
of
8.
in the middle.
It's under it's the last bullet under facilities and cleaning phases 1.
Got it. Okay. And we are where?
We are
under
Page 6 is where it needs to go.
Page 6, third bullet below the red.
1, 2, 3. In place of what we already have there, right?
Yes.
Well, in addition to.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, we don't, it's going to be a separate bullet because one bullet deals with the equipment and the other one deals with wash your clothes and take a shower.
Yes, he had already made that a separate bullet.
Oh, okay.
So now
Okay.
it's just a better statement of the same bullet.
Yes, it is. Okay.
Okay, and my second one, Darren just texted me, and he said that the groups of 10 should include the instructor. So when we talk about the pods, that's 10 students and an instructor.
We did talk about this at length too, Beth. Do we really need to put that in there?
Well,
10
that
people,
is,
10 people.
but some people, because I had this discussion with a couple of different directors at different times, it says in some documents I've read 10 groups of 10 including the instructor, and then I had other people tell me no, the instructor is a separate one. So I think we do need to put that on there to show that we're having the same wording as these other documents, because some people will try and squeak that extra student in.
It's funny. I was talking with our basketball coach the other day on campus, and he started talking about football. You know, the football season, and he said, you know, they've come up with this rule of 10 people, and on each side of the football are 11 people. You know, why didn't they come up with 11 instead of 10? So I don't know how a football team, an offensive line or defensive line or the defensive side is going to practice with just 10, but I have a feeling they'll probably work it out. But I agree, Beth, that probably needs to be put in there.
What I'll put it, let's see, I'll do this.
10 people, including students and instructor.
Well, the one that says there should be no gathering of more than 10 people, including the instructor, at a time.
Well, and I'm going to put it in red. And what I'm going to do is look in some of the source documents and see, you know, like what you're talking about, Beth, things should agree. Our documents should agree with CDC documents and governor, whatever. And so I'm putting in red as a reminder, and I'll try to find a basis for that determination. And I expect it can be found somewhere.
Yeah.
John, I may be incorrect. I think we were talking about this last time. On the Bashir document, it's 10 students and an instructor, I guess, kind of inferring that like you needed to have a coach with the group in the first phase. Like they couldn't just be student groups. It had to be students and an adult.
So Joe, do you mean that 10 people, including the instructor, or 10 people plus an instructor in the Bashir document?
10 people plus 10 people plus an instructor, because they refer to it to students and then an adult.
Okay. I'll find that, and then we'll know, and maybe it'll be then, and we can clarify it here. Whatever that says, we'll say here. It'll either be a 10 plus or 10 including, and we'll all know.
Okay. One of the bullets on there says a group of people working or rehearsing together may be known as a pod. The number of pods allowable on a campus simultaneously will be determined locally. KMEA recommends that pods rehearse with a minimum of 15 yards between them. Again, we had a pretty lengthy discussion about this. At first, when we saw the rule about no more than 10 people, whether it's with an instructor or not, we questioned, does that mean that we can have other groups of 10 at the same time somewhere else on campus, or maybe even somewhere else on a practice field? And I believe, Joe, I think you did some digging also into the KHSAA, or maybe it was the governor's summer youth programs, but we determined that it was possible to have more than one pod rehearsing simultaneously. And we came up with the idea of a minimum of 15 yards between them. So if you have use of a 100-yard field for rehearsal, then if you have 10 in one group, 10 clarinets in one group, and you have 10 low brass in another group, as long as you keep them 15 yards apart, you can do that. So if you have the room to do it, to accommodate that, we see that as a situation where you can have a lot of folks out there.
So,
Anybody-
so there's not going to be any maximum number.
Sorry, Beth, start again.
There's not going to be any maximum number. We're not going to limit to how many pods can be out there.
Well, if you've got, as long as you've got 15 yards between them, you can go from here to the square in town if you want to. If you have that availability. Now, Joe brought up at his school that, you know, there's soccer practice going on, there's football practice going on, there's a lot of other activities going on, and so, you know, he's going to have to think it through as to where he can have, you know, he has a large group. Can he accommodate everybody or not? So it's going to vary from school to school. So our recommendation was 15 yards between the pods, and it has to be outside.
It seems like I've seen somewhere on this topic that there was to be a maximum of 50 or something like that, but I don't know where that was.
I think it's from the KHSAA document that there's supposed to be a maximum of 50 students. There's supposed to be a maximum of 50 students on campus total, divided amongst all groups, and that the pods of 10 had to have an instructor with each pod. I may be wrong.
That sounds familiar.
Well, I know in phase 2, it does say 50. It does say 50. It really, it's not addressed in phase 1 as far as the total number. Curtis, you think you saw that in the KHSAA guidelines?
My understanding of phase 1 in that guideline was that with in regards to athletics, that they couldn't have any actual, they could meet with students and just meet, but until phase 2 started, they weren't allowed to do anything in terms of actual rehearsal. That's been what has been conveyed to me by my athletic director, that once phase 2 started, then it was a maximum of 50 on campus amongst all groups. And at my school, they're actually, each of the athletic groups are trying to come up with their schedules and submit it all together so that they have documentation of that each day there's at least, you know, no more than 50. So if football is going to do this on Monday and Wednesday with 2 groups of 10, and the basketball team's going to do some conditioning with a group of 10, you know, then that means there's only 20 spots left, for example, for our group. And that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the odd thing is the Beechwood campus is a little different than the Ryle campus, just to use 2 examples. So, you know, you'd think that there'd be more room on the Ryle. It seems like distance is the issue rather than maximum. I don't know.
Well, but I think facilities are also an issue too. I think if we open it up and there's, you know, all these practices going on and there's 300 kids on campus at one time, and girls volleyball and cheerleading and all these band pods all decide to take a potty break at the same time. I mean, we can't, there's no way to monitor everything. So I think if we don't put a maximum number on that, I mean, I really thought the maximum number was 10 for our group.
Let me Yeah, let me maybe look back at those things for this particular question, because this whole 10 versus 50 is pretty vague, and and I think in phase 2 it's even more vague. So maybe I can get some help from my new acquaintance at the KDE once I chat with her.
Well, this is probably pretty important to get on, because I know right now band directors are planning to meet with some of their students in the coming days. So the quicker we can.
Yep.
And I'm sure that John has already thought of this, and he deals with the KDE folks quite often. But so many of them don't understand the band thing. You know, they don't understand that you got 70 players in the band. That means you got to have 7 staff members with them. You got 200 players in the band. You got to have 20 staff members with them in groups of pods of 10, and that becomes problematic for lots of programs.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's something that this lady at KDE should be aware of.
Well, yes, and the thing is, of course, some of these things, it's like you say, if it's hard for us to do, we have to figure out a different way. If it is what it is in terms of what the recommendations need to be, if there's a logical reason behind it. Yeah, I'll work with her. We'll see.
I'm looking at a chat from Tim Zeiss. Each school should be able to designate the number of pods for their facility. He feels KMEA should not set a number.
Mm-hmm. Let's see what I mean, if the CDC is saying 50 or something like that, we'd probably better consider reflecting it in here. But I understand how directors would rather not have the constraints. I do understand, and we want to put as few as we can get by with, and still be doing what we need to do. So point taken from Tim. Point taken.
So just to be clear,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Beth.
I said, but it already says in that bullet, it says the number of pods allowable on a campus simultaneously will be determined locally. It
Yes.
already says that.
It says that, and now we just need to cross check that and make sure it's not a reckless thing to say, according to the health experts. We'll leave it like it is if we can.
Since we're talking about limitations still, I know I'm getting ahead a little bit. The limitation for a large group in phase 2 is 50 maximum, and then phase 3 is the same, up to 50 indoors and outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no ending date for phase 3. I know I'm getting ahead, but we're kind of on the topic. I read that as no group larger than 50, as stated, inside or outside, with no end date in sight, which just strictly reading that means your band can't be larger than 50.
I've seen somewhere where somebody's phase 3, I think that KHSAA actually did put a cap on the end of it about 15 days later. It was about 2 weeks later. Okay. And that sort of, so that maybe we should do the same. It stands to reason because you have this 2 week waiting period to find out if people got sick or not when you did that thing 2 weeks ago. So you know whether you can relax or tighten up or stay the same. And I do think also that, David, that by the time we get to the end of June, we'll know more about what we can recommend for phase 3 than we know now. It's going to change. It's not like this is just it's sort of like the Weather Channel forecast. You know, the closer you get to the day, the more likely it is to be accurate. But it keeps changing because they get new data, and I believe that that's what I mean when I say that this is going to be a rolling document. And the tricky part is making changes in the document and then making sure everyone knows the document has been updated. So they're not dealing with the old version that is either too restrictive or not restrictive enough based on the latest. So this is all new. As I was talking to the president of the Virginia Music Educators yesterday, asking me a question or two about some things we're doing. And he said, you know, I told my students, this is my first pandemic. And that's kind of how it is for KMEA. It's our first pandemic. So we're trying.
Okay. Any other input on this particular section?
I am looking at the return to guidelines from Bashir for the youth activities. I see where maybe some of that question is coming into play because there's obviously different types of youth sports or athletic activities. There's low touch and high touch, and then there's indoor and outdoor for each of those. But when you look at phase 2, which is June 29th for this document for the high touch indoor, high touch outdoor, that's where it says all team group practices are limited to 50 youths or fewer.
Right. But we're not high touch.
Right. But I mean, when you look at the low touch, I think it's not just how I say it. Like when you look at what they define a low touch activity is, those aren't large groups either. They're all like solo acts or small group teams. And then the big teams are in the high touch version.
Right. So our bands are an anomaly because they are a big team and yet they are low touch, if not no touch. So
right.
Yeah, that we may have to have our own unique way of interpreting these things.
Yeah.
Because of that. Very important.
Anything
Okay.
else in this particular section?
Okay, this may be a little minute thing here, and I may be reading this totally wrong, but when you're talking about a staff member with each pod of 10, if you've got different pods spread out all over your football field, and you're rehearsing, say, music, but you've got the distance between each pod. If you've got that one director up here that's directing all the pods together, would that not be considered the same process as having an instructor with that pod? Like Terry was talking about earlier about how many staff members you'd have to have. Does that make sense? Am I saying that right? Must not be.
I'm taking it in, Paul.
If you have 50 students segregated in groups of 10, but one director.
And that one director is directing all the pods.
Is that considered one rehearsal of 50, or is that 5 rehearsals of 10? Just happening to follow one instructor.
Yeah. If the pods are sufficiently distanced from one another and they're all facing the drill tower and the metronome's in the back of the field on the 50 and it's clicking the tempo and they're playing, they're not moving, but they're playing. I have trouble thinking anybody would find that to be objectionable because the distancing is there. They just are all having their separate rehearsals at the exact same time as governed by Dr. Beat. So yeah, I think if somebody can pull that off, I don't, that just makes sense. What you're talking about, that's the case. It's again, untrod path here.
Well, I don't know that we answered your question, Pauletta, but other than you might want to give it a try.
Well, yeah, you did. It was just basically, it wasn't a question necessarily. It was a statement of, I'm thinking, what I would do.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. But of course, I always had a small band, so it wouldn't have been that much of a problem. So, yeah.
I think what we get at is the spirit of the document is that social distancing.
Yes.
And how it's pulled off, using these guidelines is the important thing, and not so much kind of those types of details.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. if there's nothing else on this section on limitations on gatherings for phase one, we're ready now to, and a reminder, phase one is all outside. We're ready to move on now to limitations on gatherings for phase two. Phase two is June 29th through July 12th. Again, bullet one, consider strategy to prevent groups from gathering at entrances, exits to facilities to limit crossover and contact, including staggering, starting, and ending times. Okay. Inside gatherings of up to 10 people at a time. So you can't have a gathering inside of 10 people. Outdoor gathering rehearsals up to 50 individuals. Next bullet, music rehearsals at which wind instruments are to be used should take place outdoors. I'll say that again. Music rehearsals at which wind instruments are to be used should take place outdoors. If weather prevents outdoor rehearsals, rehearsals may be allowed indoors as long as a minimum of 10 feet between each individual can be achieved. School supplied buckets should be allowed for emptying condensation from brass instruments. Buckets are to be sanitized after each rehearsal. We'll probably come back to that bullet. Next bullet. Schools should devise a plan for care of students if a sudden weather-related danger makes staying outside a danger, similar as to the previous phase. And also, we've put a placeholder and some more research to be done on restrooms, cleaning, and the number of individuals at one time. Next bullet, there should be no carpooling to or from rehearsal, same as before. Next bullet, directors should create a plan for students getting instruments from the band room to the practice facility that allows for social distancing and sanitation, such as staggered times of migration. I know that Beechwood's document had students entered at staggered times to avoid everyone being at the same place at the same time, whether to pick up instruments or put them up. Next bullet, rehearsals should be conducted in pods of students with the same students always working together. This ensures more limited exposure if someone develops an infection. John has included in here further clarification is being sought from the Kentucky Governor's Office regarding the number of students that may be allowed at a rehearsal during phase two. Okay. And then also, as he mentioned before, and you all probably are aware, there's an aerosol study. It's being actually a duplication. One's in Colorado, one's in Massachusetts. We are awaiting results from that, and that will help guide us as well. We may not know anything until the end of June on that. But that link is also referred to here too. Their link is actually mentioned a little bit later on in the document to check out that aerosol study. Next bullet, social distancing should be observed when music is being taught. Students should learn and rehearse the music standing still or sitting, spaced at a minimum of 6-foot intervals. If teachers or instructors need to move within the 6-foot area to correct a student's playing position, embouchure, posture, etc., they should do so briefly and then move back away. Same as phase one. Students, next bullet. Students should be spaced by the show designer, drill writer at a minimum of 3-step intervals, same as before, for all drill and on-field formations. Next bullet. Instruments, equipment, and sheet music should not be shared without proper cleaning and disinfecting, including music stands, drumsticks, and color guard equipment. Next bullet. Musical equipment that absolutely must be shared. Corey, this alludes to what you had mentioned before. Musical equipment that absolutely must be shared, certain percussion items, as in parentheses, should be wiped down thoroughly with school supplied sanitizing wipes before and after an individual's use of such equipment. And the last bullet under phase two for limitations on gatherings, Additional guidance will be forthcoming with regard to putting marching drill to music once the commissioned aerosol research study is completed and the results have been published. And there is a link to the study listed there in that bullet. Okay, so that is the information on phase 2 for limitations on gatherings. Phase 2 is June 29th through July 12th. Discussion, comments?
I know this document is, specifically talking about marching band, but I had another director send me a message and I agree with him. I think if we put in that, it's the top of the page here, top page 7, where we're talking about indoors, as long as there's a minimum of 10 feet between each individual. I worry that if we put that on paper, we're going to dig ourselves a hole for class time as well.
This is in line with some other things that I can't tell you exactly. It may be Texas, it may be NFHS. The 10-foot when playing thing is not, we didn't make that up. So we don't, for the time being, that seems to be the best guidance. And I saw it just this morning, I know, when I was looking through some things, trying to mess with this a little bit more. It is restrictive, and it's pretty scary, and we're all scared about what's going to happen in the fall with class instruction and how many kids can be in the room at once. I do think the aerosol study will tell us if 10 feet is too much, not enough, or too much. And I think the 10 feet, I believe, is the best we have right now, as odious and as scary as that may sound. And I don't think we have a choice but to tell them that. Otherwise, they'll think it's 6 feet inside, and that is not what we're being told. So that's my response anyway.
So if that's what we're saying, then down lower, in the social distancing should be observed when music is being taught paragraph, we're talking about 6 feet there. Should we specify that that's talking about outdoors then, or are we just going to assume that people will?
I think so.
Yes, I think we need to specify outdoors under that bullet that includes 6-foot intervals.
And Michael, I saw some of the comments as well. I've been getting a few of those things as well. I've been looking at this more from the classroom perspective, from my role of trying to do that. And when we were talking about this earlier in the week, I was kind of trying to figure out if there was a way to combine those things or put those in the document. But this one's more specific for marching band. And the other thing is, like John just said, I guess knowing that study is out there, it's hard for us to put too much down on the classroom procedures without knowing what that thing's going to tell us. Right. I have a feeling it might even be different for specific instruments, when you're talking about a flute versus a trumpet kind of thing. So we're going to have to wait and see. Hopefully they'll give us a lot of guidance on that. And it's the same thing, obviously, for marching and playing at the same time, what that does, I guess. So hopefully that study will give us some positive information. At least we're all hoping that's the case.
Other comments?
On a separate note, under the bullet that says directors should create a plan for students getting instrument from the band room to allow for social distancing. Before in phase 1, we said that they had to bring their instruments and take them home every day, and unless they were too big, and we couldn't use storage rooms at all. So in phase 2, does that mean we can use storage rooms now?
I think that's what it's supposed to be. I think that's why it's different.
I think so too. Are you suggesting, Beth, that we do make another statement that storage rooms are available now, can be used?
I don't know, you know, if people just are going to read that and assume like before, you know, when it's absent, that means we can go ahead and do it.
Well, that is a fair assumption, I think, because the rules or limitations are stated for each phase, and they have, you know, they were from the NFHS document. The limitations were stated. If a limitation is not stated, it does not exist for a given phase. I believe that's the intent. It is a good idea in a few cases, like we've talked about, and possibly here, a good idea to clarify that, you know, that particular nightmare is over, and because we're in a new phase and we can relax it a little bit unless things get worse. If things get worse societally, they'll change that, you know, and suddenly phase one restrictions will go into phase two. Gosh, you know, we hope not. But if things keep going okay, then this is the expectation. Of course, a smart kid's going to bring his clarinet in the car anyway and just avoid that hole.
Well, could we say something like use of a storage room is now up to local discretion, something like that? I mean, because our storage room is just real tight space. You know, I just. That way it at least encourages people to think about it.
Anything wrong with that?
Use of storage room is up to local discretion. That covers it.
Okay, and then underneath the one where it says social distancing should be observed when music is being taught, we don't really say anything about guard. I mean, obviously we know they need to be far enough away for the length of their equipment, but
You just change it to say during instruction.
social distancing should be observed when instruction is taking place.
The next sentence could just be students should learn and rehearse standing still or sitting. You could take out the music.
I think a lot of this one, as it started out, this bullet started out being a cautionary about what we don't know over aerosol distribution from someone who's playing a wind instrument. It's morphed into a little more than that, but maybe that's okay.
And the last one that I would say is, I feel like schools should devise a plan for care of students if a sudden weather-related danger makes staying outside a danger. That just seems kind of.
It's supposed to be a risk.
Redundant.
Yeah, it is. Oh, yeah, in each other
7.
case, yeah. In the other two cases, when we've gotten to this, I've changed that to risk so we don't have the same word in the sentence twice.
Okay.
Yeah, that sentence got built by a committee. I think Tim is, here he is, he's back.
Sorry. nature was calling. Where are we?
We feel like I think we've done about all we're going to do for phase 2. I think we're ready to start phase 3.
All right. Phase 3. Bullet 1. Gathering sizes of up to 50 individuals indoors or outdoors. This is, by the way, phase 3 is after July 12. Bullet 2, schools should devise a plan for care of students if a sudden weather-related danger makes staying outside a risk. Again, the restroom cleaning number of individuals at one time needs to be addressed there as well. Next bullet, there should be no carpooling to or from rehearsals still. Next bullet, when not directly participating in practices or contests, care should be taken to maintain a minimum distance of 3 feet, but ideally at least 6 feet between each individual. Consider using tape or paint as a guide for students and directors. I think the statement used to say 3 to 6 feet. Am I right, John? And then you've changed it to 3 feet.
Well,
and ideally at least 6.
Yeah, it's pretty careless to say a minimum distance of 3 to 6 feet. I mean, what, a minimum distance of 3, but I think what they were getting at is that if you can be a little more than 3, that's good. And this was, of course, this was not during instruction. Your question kind of was thinking that it was during instruction.
Right.
When you ask, this could be, yeah. So then I recognize that where you were going with it, but then I also centered on the minimum of 3 to 6 feet, which is dumb. So that's where I changed it. I think it works pretty well now.
Good. Yeah, it does. All right. Where am I? Next bullet. Musical equipment that absolutely must be shared. Certain percussion items should be wiped down thoroughly with school supplied sanitizing wipes before and after an individual's use of such equipment. I think we had this mentioned in the earlier one too. Do we need to change musical equipment to just equipment? That, a piece of a color guard saber is equipment, it's not musical. So I think that happened maybe earlier too. And then the last bullet, additional guidance will be forthcoming with regard to putting marching drill to music once the commissioned aerosol research study is completed and results have been published. The study is described here, and there's a link to that as well. Okay, comments on phase 3.
The adjustment that you just made to musical equipment would also need to be made on page 7.
Yeah, it was there earlier too, yes.
Second bullet from the bottom on page 7. The heading for limitations on gatherings, comma, phase 3, instead of an open parentheses.
Good deal.
I guess I'm going to backtrack a little bit, but kind of tying into this just because I'm getting some messages as well about the indoors for phase 2, the 10 feet. I guess we're using that number off of, I think it was the NF, the high school thing, and then the UIL one, correct? That's where we're getting that from. That's not I think it's not a CDC thing, obviously, because they haven't given any guidance from that perspective, at least other than the 6 feet of social distancing. I wonder if,
right.
I guess I'm looking at it, from some of the comments in the chat, but also the other side is if we are opening up that box of trying to figure that out for in the school day without having the information from the study, I wonder if we can tweak that part of the document since we don't have that information just yet.
Well, Joe, this is all still in July.
Right.
And I know people are wanting to plan for fall, but nobody's made plans that far in advance. So what's going, I mean, it stands to reason to me anyway, that if you're indoors, and if you don't have just wonderful air exchange, you would want to be further away than the usual. And we know 6 feet. I think that's probably where they're coming up with this. It's not going to satisfy everybody, and I regret that. I'd love to satisfy everybody. And I know people just, they don't say this because then they're going to transfer it over for once we get to school. But that's certainly not the intent, because this is still July. That's a month, at least a month before that, and 2 months after. Well, 1.5 to 2 months after we get the results of a scientific study on it. So if we can tweak it, that's fine. But I do think that, I mean, if we just maybe want to say this, we don't know enough about August and September yet, or something here.
What
sort of just
right? I guess I'm looking at it as if there's a way to kind of, I guess, leave it more up to what goes on within those schools. If we said something, and then you guys can shut this down if you don't like it, but for that bullet where we talk about that, which is the second bullet on page 7, if we if weather prevents outdoor rehearsals, may be allowed indoors as long as school approved social distancing can be between each individual can be achieved, or something like that, instead of putting an exact number on it. Or what do you guys think about that?
Well, here's what the schools are saying. I'll say one more thing, then I'll let other people talk, I guess. Here's what the schools are saying. They're saying to band directors, what's KMEA saying about playing indoors? Because they don't have any guidance on that yet, because it's music and not sports. And, there's just not been as much attention to it, because why? And it's okay. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what the FHS music guy and his people did with their sports document, transferring it into music terms as best they could. So I'll just say that for the moment.
Or do we, I guess, as the committee, do we feel like 10 feet of social distancing inside for an indoor rehearsal with 10 kids, is it worth or to just wait and take indoor rehearsals out until after the study's concluded, to not even have it in there? I don't know. I guess I'm just throwing that out there. And if we feel like the wording's good and we leave it as is, but I know for me, I guess trying to figure out where I would rehearse 10 kids with 10 feet of distance between them would almost be possible already. So I probably wouldn't even look for it until we have more information to even just take that idea out of it altogether.
Well, it's probably going to happen that I mean, we could not even address phase 2 at all, because it's a while away yet, or phase 3. I mean, we could just not even have a phase 3, for one thing. And what this is the long distance, what's being thought. And it will probably rain on somebody, and they'll have to decide. The fact that it's hard to do what the guidelines, as best we know them now, are, that somebody can't figure out how to do that doesn't, it really, it puts us in a bad place, because it's going to happen and there's going to be no guidelines. And these are the best guidelines we have, and maybe they're too restrictive. And I know some people think they are. I understand that.
Anybody else have any thoughts on this at all, or just let it go?
For me, I know that we are trying to make plans, but it's hard to make plans because we don't know what's going to happen and everything. And likewise, I know a lot of school districts are already making plans for how they're going to address this when we do come back. And I know from some of the band directors that I've heard from around in my area, there's already this discussion of, well, we're going to have the directors teach, be a proxy to a math class or an English class and all this. And I understand where these guidelines are coming from the indoor 10 feet. But I feel like if we put that out there, then we are giving them more ammunition to say, oh, well, KNEA even says that you all need to be at least 10 feet apart. So now we can't legitimize your class happening during the school day. And what we've got planned for you to do to be a proxy to these other subjects, we're more, this is more of what we need to do. I just think it's, I agree with Joe and some of the other sentiments here of not having that included, to word it similar that we did maybe phase 1 or whatever. But I do see the concern there of putting that number out there.
Any other input on this particular subject?
If there's a concern about the particular number, would it be possible for us to just put a clause in there that specific numbers are pending the results of the aerosol study that we keep referencing to? That way administrators and directors and superintendents understand that it is on our radar, but that we don't have a specific answer because we're waiting for research-based experiments to give us that final answer pending that time period instead of just giving guidelines now.
Dr. Strobe has added a statement like that to that bullet.
Yeah, and she's making me think a little more too. I'm trying to think of a way to leave the bullet in as a placeholder, to say that the minimum distance that will be recommended by the time we get there. See, it really doesn't matter yet because this is what starts after, aren't we in phase 3, right? This is what starts.
This is phase 2.
Well, it's what's, yeah, it's what starts about the time the study hopefully will get reported. But to say that the minimum feet will be recommended will be determined at that time. Does that make, would that, Joe, do you think that'd be to replace this that I'm putting in red with something that says to be determined at a distance to be determined at the end of the aerosol study?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, until we have that, we just don't have a lot to go. We have guesses or practices to go off of, but I know I'm anxiously waiting that for classroom stuff, which obviously leads to indoor marching band too. So I think that would be better.
If weather prevents outdoor rehearsals may be allowed indoors at a distance to be determined once the results of the aerosol study are available. Good with that?
Should we put a current recommendation? I mean, it's saying that the distances will be determined. Should there be?
Well, by the time this, I'm sorry, by the time this period starts, we probably won't have our information yet. And it may be a week into this phase or so that we're able to include anything in the document. And that's what that second sentence now says, you know.
I guess my question is the current, without any data that we have, or with the data that we currently have, which is not much, is the current recommendation 10 feet? Is that why that was in there?
Yes, I would say that's right.
On the document that the the UIL document that came out, the recommendation was 10 feet.
That could be stated. I mean, the current recommendation from UIL is 10 feet.
Well, they're not a national authority, and they took well. I don't know.
Taken from the national high school.
Even though about 10 people sent me the links the day after that came out, even so, but they were quick. I mean, they were early. They got on it really quickly. Good on them.
Or back to Joe, should it just be?
Yeah, I think it's okay. The more I think it's okay the way it is. And if somebody has a question, they'll email me and I'll say, well, in Texas, they say 10 feet. But I can't do that. Well, yeah, it's all recommendations. I suppose it's all right. If hopefully we'll keep administrators from, like people say, applying that to the fall prematurely, which could be good. I'm okay with it. I think we're covering the bases here.
Okay. Any other input in this section? Well, this is actually phase 2.
We went back to phase 2. The second half of that talks about the school supplied buckets. To clarify, that does belong with that bullet, which is only for inside music rehearsals. Yes.
That's my thinking.
Okay, so not needed for outside. So it does stay in that bullet. Okay. I was just.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions about phase 3 in terms of limitations on gatherings? If not, I'm going to move ahead. All right, facilities cleaning. And it's basically for all phases. So these bullets, with the exception of one, they apply to every single phase. Facilities cleaning. First bullet, adequate cleaning schedule should be created and implemented for all facilities used to mitigate any communicable diseases. Bullet 2, prior to an individual or groups of individuals entering a facility, hard surfaces within that facility should be wiped down and sanitized. Chairs, furniture, storage rooms, instrumental equipment, bathrooms, etc. Some of you, I think, maybe you haven't muted your microphones, and I'm picking up a lot of extra sound, so you might want to just check that. Next bullet, for phases 1 and 2 only, sufficient distance should be established between the locations of instrument storage, music rehearsal, and break areas. That's not for phase 3, it's just phase 1 and 2. The next bullet is for all 3 phases. Individuals should wash their hands for a minimum of 20 seconds with warm water and soap before touching any surfaces or participating in rehearsals. Next bullet, school supplied hand sanitizers should be plentiful and available to individuals as they transfer from place to place. Next bullet, appropriate clothing or shoes should be worn at all times. Appropriate clothing / shoes should be worn at all times. Next bullet, students must be encouraged to return home immediately after the rehearsal and to shower and wash their rehearsal clothing immediately upon arrival at their home. And those are the bullets under facilities cleaning for all 3 phases.
We need to fix the date for phase 3. It says after June 12th, should be after July 12th.
Thank you. Comments?
Do we need to immediately in the last one?
No.
That would also go for the place where we copied and pasted it.
Yes and no. I hate seeing the same word twice in a sentence because it just doesn't read well, but.
Well, we say upon arrival at their home. When they get home, take a shower.
Well, that's what we mean. Okay. Where was that other place?
I think it's okay to have it in both places because it's in two separate occasions that you're referencing the.
Oh, it's just the two immediately.
Correct. I know
What if we
you're
say prompt. What if we say promptly?
Oh, I like that.
Where was the other place where this went? I'll copy it up there.
It was up there with
Page 6. It was page 6, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th bullet.
Students should report to rehearsals in proper attire.
Okay. Page 6 is fixed.
Okay. Anything else under facilities cleaning for the 3 phases?
Okay. What exactly is appropriate clothing and shoes? Do we need like? What does that even mean?
Mm-hmm. I know it when I see it. Yeah.
Does it need to be included? Does it need to be in there? I mean, does it matter whether you've got no clothes on or you have your winter coat on and galoshes?
Yeah, this was just brought in from, I think, the NFHS document, and that's what they said, but that doesn't mean we can't make it better or remove it if it's stupid to have it in there.
I mean, most directors have a dress code for their rehearsals anyway, and they're not going to change what they normally wear for a rehearsal because of the COVID. Because of COVID, they're not going to change. You wear your tennis shoes and you wear your bright colored clothes, and that's not anything because of COVID.
Yeah. Should we just take it out?
I think it's a good suggestion, Curtis. I think it needs to be taken out.
Was that anywhere else in the document or just this one place?
That's the only place I remember it being.
Yep, it is. It's the only place.
Okay. Anything else under facilities cleaning? All right, I'm moving on to hydration / food for the 3 phases. Okay. We're coming down the home stretch here, guys. You're doing well. First bullet, all students should bring their own water bottles and food. Water bottles and food must be shared. Social distancing guidelines should be observed during water, snack, and meal breaks. And the second bullet, hydration stations, for example, water cows, water troughs, water fountains, etc., should not be utilized. In other words, community drinking areas.
Right.
So those are the 2 bullets that cover all 3 phases right there. That first bullet, all students should bring their own water bottles and food. Water bottles and food must not be shared, and social distancing guidelines should be observed during water, snack, and meal breaks. Something just came to my mind on the food. All students should bring their own water bottles and food. Is it not possible? And again, each district may be different, but I think I've heard of some districts where cafeteria workers are going to be on staff and will have ready-made lunches available for some students. It's a couple of isolated cases that I've heard about doing that, but it may open up to that eventually. So does it need to say all students should bring their food, their own food?
I don't think it should. because a lot of the schools are going to be supplying it in this area. I know they're supplying it, right now, and they're going to continue to do that. And
Yeah,
this says they need food, and maybe they're only there for 2 hours and don't need food,
well, that's true, of course. The one thing everybody wants, and we can possibly take it for granted, is that we want the school to serve the food in an aware way. You're not going to do, you're not going to go through with your tray and have them. It's going to be more careful than usual food distribution, and maybe they're just going to do that because it is worldwide.
I know our school district is talking about the kids eating in the classrooms anyway, so it's going to be distributed by the school employees. But I wonder if we say all students should bring their own water bottles and food unless prepared by school employees. Did that fix it?
Mm-hmm.
Also, we need to change the date up above for 3. It still says after June 12th.
Where's that?
Hydration food phases 1, 2, and 3. And after 3, it says after June 12th.
You already fixed it.
Oh, he already fixed it. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the old one.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know about the food thing. I don't know what to say. One thing is the next sentence does say water bottles and food must not be shared, when that makes sense.
Well, Beth is saying put back in food, or how did you word it, Beth? All students should bring their own water bottles.
Why don't we say if it something like, since it's separate sentences, if meals are taken, or if meals are eaten at the school site, food should be brought by, each student should bring their own food unless prepared by school employees.
Or we could just say refer to your school's food guidelines, because that's going to be different for every district. Like Beth said, I heard that's what we're considering doing too, eating lunches in classrooms when they go back in August. So maybe I don't know, maybe we don't even mention food in our guidelines. We just say refer to your school. I don't know if anybody thinks that's a good idea. And then one thing before I forget it, maybe mention when it's talking about water breaks, staggering breaks. I know we mentioned that before, but it might be a good idea to mention it here too.
So social distancing guidelines should be observed during water, snack, and meal breaks. Consider staggering break times.
And then maybe refer to your district's guidelines on student meals.
I agree with that.
Yeah, that sounds good too. I'm wondering though, because this is going to precede the beginning of the school by an entire month, and
or maybe consult with your school district, because I mean, even if they don't come out with a ruling on it, you need to talk to them and get out of it.
I know that and right now we're trying to do a plate lunch fundraiser, and we're having to submit how we're going to go about that to our superintendent so that he can have it approved by the health department. So I'm thinking that if we can get approved to do that, that we could do that as a fundraiser and whatnot, then surely if our parent group had a plan in place of how they could prepare meals for the students, so I just think it's whatever each school district, I think that's within them to do, and we stay away from food.
okay to mention it the way I did here in this new second bullet? What do you think?
Consult with school or school district officials regarding meal preparation and distribution.
That way we've addressed it, but we haven't specified.
I'm good with that.
I think that not only is a good guideline, but also helps the director in covering themselves.
Good deal.
Liability.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we good here under hydration and food? Okay. I'm moving down to, John's making a correction here, contest in bold letters. All right. Transportation to events. Schools must consider social distancing requirements when scheduling contests and events for the fall. Social distancing, as required by the state or local health department, will need to be maintained on buses/vans. Thus, multiple buses, vans, and/or parent/guardian transportation will likely be needed. Let me go ahead and I don't know if I should stop here or move ahead.
We should probably talk about this because it's one of the big worries.
Well, I have what I think may be some welcoming news, and I'm kind of surprised that someone hasn't brought it to our attention this morning. Have you heard about the latest from the health department?
Not the health department. I think Michael Wicks said something to me 2 or 3 days ago that was sort of on the level of rumor is, but so what have you heard?
Well, I have a written document here. I just got it this morning, and pardon me for looking over to the one side here. I'm looking at my phone, and this is a news release that I read this morning. Let's see, KHSAA and public health officials provide guidance for Kentucky superintendents during their webcast. They had this on Tuesday, this webcast. Bear with me. The Kentucky Department for Public Health joined Kentucky's 172 superintendents and leadership from the Kentucky Department of Education during a June 2nd webcast to provide additional guidance on reopening school buildings in the fall. One of the biggest points of contention for the superintendents was the DPH recommendation that school buses implement social distancing by allowing no more than one student to a seat. DPH has updated this guidance and now says that social distancing does not need to be enforced on school buses if students are wearing masks, are practicing proper hygiene, and have had their temperature and symptoms checked. So this is good news. This is really good news if this is accurate.
I've seen that too. And I think I heard somebody on the commissioner's call saying it doesn't matter very much because they're not together very long.
Right, right.
And, going along with that idea that it's the time that you're being exposed to a certain level of viral particles is important as well as the intensity of them. Okay, makes sense. Now, that's sort of.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that it could be an inconvenient truth that van trips are maybe longer than your average bus run. I know some bus runs take forever. I get that, but most of them aren't that long, and probably not as long as taking the Madison Central Band to the Ryle contest or whatever. So that's gonna. We'll see if that kicks in. I'm a little worried about that, but it is good news if you just have to wear masks and it's considered to be okay. Just depends on how long the trip before somebody goes, now, wait a minute. I don't know.
Yeah. Here's there's a little bit more information. Emily Mazzarelli is the immunization branch manager for the Department of Health. She's quoted as saying, bus rides, yes, you're in a confined space, but it's time limited. In the classroom, we can't have students being on top of each other because they're in the classroom for 7 to 8 hours. The bus ride is less time, so there's less exposure.
That's what I'm talking about.
She said families will be expected to provide a mask for students. However, school buses should keep masks on hand in case students show up without one. Even though guidance on school buses has been loosened to ensure students can be transported to school, the DPH staff said that guidelines regarding mask and social distancing in the school building are still in place. So this is encouraging news.
It is.
Brad?
And I've always said, I think everyone has said, whatever football gets to do, then band should get to do. That stands to reason.
Yeah, George put up here from Brad, and I think this is a real good thing. The state level guidance concerning field trips. Instead of just looking at transportation to school, look for guidance regarding field trips.
Good point.
Yay, Brad.
Yep.
Yeah, that's gonna be okay for the folks who are close, but the Murrays and the Ashlands of the world that got to get on a bus, the round counties, Jenny's nodding her head. There are not many contests over here in Eastern Kentucky anymore. Pauletta used to ride school buses for 4, 5, 6 hours to get to and from a contest. It would worry me that and some of the folks in the if you've read the results of the survey, the comment section of the survey make that same point. It's a 3-hour bus ride from Ashland to Lexington if you want to go to a contest in Lexington. So it might become an issue when the superintendents or the powers that be realize that their football team is going to play somebody in Northern Kentucky and they live in Eastern Kentucky. They're on the bus for 4 hours. It'd be an issue down the road.
Don't rain on my parade, Terry.
Well, okay, so what if we just put on this bullet, schools must consider state level guidance concerning field trips when scheduling contests and events for the fall.
Say it again.
Okay. Schools must consider state level guidance concerning field trips when scheduling contests and events for the fall.
Okay. Schools must consider state level guidelines concerning field trips when scheduling contests and events for the fall. Okay. Anything else? I'm going to move ahead. If you think of something, we can come back. We're under contest. The second heading, social distancing during contests / events / activities. A, warm up / clinic rooms, period. I guess we need to put after that. Warm up / clinic rooms, period. Appropriate social distancing will need to be maintained during contests and events. Consider using tape or paint as a guide for students and staff. The B section, who should be allowed at events? Group people into tiers from essential to preferred to non-essential and decide which tiers will be allowed at an event. Tier 1, considered essential, would be the student participants, the directors, adjudicators, the event staff, the medical staff, and security. Tier 2, categorized as preferred, would be the media. And then Tier 3 are the non-essentials, which are spectators and vendors. Only Tier 1 and 2 personnel will be allowed to attend events until state/local health departments lift restrictions on mass gatherings. So at this point, we don't have control over spectators or vendors. We're Tier 3 right now.
Where do volunteers and staff fit in there?
Event staff.
Staff. Well, it says event staff. Should we just say staff?
Well, we could say band staff.
Where do the parents that are definitely needed to get the equipment on and off the field?
I was going to.
They are band staff.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're at for the contest purposes. The pit are staff.
Can you say that again, John? You're breaking up.
What's Tim?
You were breaking up. I didn't hear any of that, and I think others didn't hear it either.
I'm sorry. I didn't know. I said in my view, the Pit Papa group is band staff. Did that come through?
Yes, it did. It did. So
I'm wondering, sorry, Tim. I'm wondering if we also need to specifically put chaperones for students listed somewhere, because those parents might not necessarily be considered in that pit area, but just to make sure that those approved chaperones are also included.
Well, it's a good question. We give tickets 1 per 10. Chaperones, are they going to be admitted to the stand and become spectators? I don't think so. I think they'd have to stay outside and let the band go in and wait for them, and then when they come back out, they're waiting for them, I think. So then the question is, of course they're allowed on the grounds. They're just not allowed into the performance venue, I think, at that level. It's a really good question because it's not very well specified.
Well, when you say at the event, you would think the event would include everything rather than just the performance area. So my two questions were also going to be about changing rooms and about the whole tailgating prep area in the parking lot, because that's considered the event as well.
At this point, would we want to recommend that changing rooms be used at all? My gosh, that's a nightmare. I mean, you'd have to let only so many kids change at once. You'd have to clean between bands.
Well, if we're not going to use changing rooms, then we need to say changing until Tier 3, that, or I don't know, if ever, that changing rooms will not be supplied at events.
This entire section here on contests seems to go beyond the scope of just starting up guidelines for starting marching bands.
It's going pretty far into the future because that's after Labor Day, except for we do have preview things in August, of course.
Yeah. I mean, so our dates right now go up to July 12th and after, and we're looking, at contests late August, September. So there's just
Yeah.
a lot of information we don't have that we're trying to put guidelines together. Of course, this will change.
Of course.
I'm getting several texts from people who host contests, and that their main concern has come up during this right here. They're just worried about even putting the time and energy into planning on hosting if they can't, if they're going to go into the red. I think that's
No,
how
they shouldn't do that. Yeah, we haven't. That's good, David, and we haven't had this talk with the managers exactly. That was a question on the survey for the people that host contests. If they self-identified as a contest host, I asked them at what percentage of your stadium capacity does it get so low that you basically have to bail on the thing. And it didn't take very long. You know, if you dropped it to 75% capacity, you lost, I don't know, 15% of them or something like that. And when you got down to around 50%, you lost a lot of them. Enough that there wouldn't be enough to go around. I don't really know because we didn't clarify it with them. It seems to me if you normally host a contest and that's a fundraiser and you're supposed to make several $1,000s, that's the idea. This year contest, you make nothing. What if you offered the contest and broke even, just barely paid for your judges and whatever? You might be willing to do that this one year, just in order to keep things rolling. But I didn't ask it that way. So I don't really know, you know, those answers could be affected by, well, if we're not going to make our several $1,000s, it's not worth it. Maybe this year it is when you think of it that way. So that's a whole nother conversation. We're not in control of what the mass gathering thing will be. Whatever happens for football games will probably be how marching band contests are treated in terms of audience capacity. And we don't know yet. That could be a contest killer. It could be an SMBC killer, that capacity of stadium thing. And I don't know that we're any closer than we were a month before, except that we're just closer in time. And eventually somebody's going to have to make that call. And it's going to be KHSAA with lots of input from health experts. So all of this could be a moot point because they might not be able to have them. But what we're trying to do is plan for if they are allowed to. What do we say? It's really hard.
We do have a discussion item on our agenda today that discusses the survey questions, and we do plan to get to that. We're coming down the home stretch. I'd rather stick to getting through this document as it is right now, and if we need to add something, we can, and then we can discuss a lot of these other things that are being asked both through the YouTube and through our committee here as well.
Well, I think if we're going to address the events, we have to address the parking lot and we have to address the changing room.
Okay, that's where we are right now. You were starting a B bullet up there, John, just above it. It says changing rooms. You started to write something about that.
Yeah.
Changing rooms will not be available.
So is that to say that bands should arrive dressed and ready?
Or, you know, in halves where they can put their coat on, but.
Or change on the buses.
Those who go to BOA.
Go to a BOA show, half the time they don't provide any of that stuff anyway. You have to do it yourself in the parking lot.
I thought BOA was perfect. I had to say that. Yeah, I think this year is an exceptional year, and we've always expected hosts to have changing rooms. And this year, I think we should expect them not to because it's too complicated and dangerous, as far as we know.
For 2A, I think the wording just needs to be cleaned up. Warm up / clinic rooms, period, incomplete sentence. So maybe add that to the end of the first sentence. Appropriate social distancing will need to be maintained during contests and events in warm up and clinic rooms. Warm up areas and clinic rooms.
Uh-huh. I think that is clear.
Yeah.
I was going to say something. Parent chaperones should
Yeah, do
be
Chris? Here we go.
allowed onto the campus, but they should not be expect to be permitted into the
Performance area.
something like that.
Yeah, until tier 3.
Well, what if you just said that parent chaperones should be allowed onto the campus, but will be included in tier 3 spectators?
Yeah. Well, we're in tier 1 right now, so that's kind of an over.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Because they're not essential for the performance. Like suddenly your band dad pushing the pit cart group's going to grow, but I don't.
Well, so we should say that for tier 2 as well then. So that would be a copy paste.
That second sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to chaperone kids, and then you're not going to be able to go in and be on the sideline or whatever to watch them perform, you're going to be pushing some kind of equipment somewhere, somehow.
I know. Yeah, I'm carrying this drumstick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
You might finally get enough people to move props.
Don't get used to it.
I always had more people moving props than I had kids on the field, Beth.
Well, yeah, there you go. A totally different situation.
Yeah.
I wonder if we go up to 2A, appropriate social distancing will need to be maintained during contest events in the parking lot, warm-up areas, and clinic rooms.
Looks pretty good.
Personally, I think that if you just leave it at appropriate social distancing will need to be maintained during contests and events, period, no matter where you're at. That would take care of everything.
There is some wisdom there. What does everybody else think?
I like that.
It kind of seems like we're reaching in order to provide any guidance on contests at this point. I really think there's always a guessing aspect to what we're doing. This is complete shot in the dark. I don't really think we need to include any guidance on contest at this point, because I don't think that's the intent of this document. Just my opinion.
Understood.
Bullet for fall rehearsals and travel, it states forthcoming will be guidelines. Would you recommend striking everything under contests and saying that guidelines are coming basically once the studies are done.
We're going to get questions at this time from contest hosts, of course.
True.
And what I'm hoping to do, I mean, what I get what Grant's saying, and if the further away it is, the more vague we are, just like that weather report thing I talked about before. I can't tell you now what it's going to do next month on the weather, but I might be able to tell you this Saturday. Maybe would it be an appropriate compromise to put here under contests, right up where it says contests, that due to somehow that this is the best we have at this point. This will certainly change as the dates approach, something like that. But leave something in there that gives them a sense of where we're going.
Well, we've addressed this as tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. There's no dates on there. It's just tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And we are trying to develop this just like the sports have. So KHSAA is already addressing football games.
Yes.
So I think if we are trying to make a document that works along that, I think we've got to address it in some way.
Yeah. So
Quick
basically,
question. Are we hopeful that we're going to have more information after, this July 12th date? And if so, then, why can't we focus on the contest side of this document, at that point? Is it too late in the game to consider those details then?
Well,
yeah.
As we started this whole conversation today, the whole meeting, this is a rolling document, and we are going to react to changes that are made. And it's my suggestion that we meet at least one more time again next month, which would be a month from now, which would be sometime after July 4th. And I would pretty much guarantee that things will have changed between now and then, and we may be able to fine tune and have a little bit better direction on how to account for what we do at contest.
I kind of agree with what Grant said, and I think a lot of us on here are contest hosts, and even as a contest host, right now, it does kind of seem like we're reaching really far into the future to try to just provide some information that we're all kind of in the dark on. To me, I think that we've pretty much covered all the really important things that we met for today, which was trying to get started. I think that's the primary thing on everybody's agenda, is trying to get started. And maybe I'm wrong in that. I could be totally wrong. But that seems like the more pressing issue to me, and we can worry about September later. Maybe I'm crazy.
I think I agree with you, Michael, that it's a little early, but I also think that while superintendents and principals are in the process of approving whether or not this can happen, they're going to ask questions about September. And so I think that maybe adding an extra clause at the beginning before these tier 3s, just a reminder, this is a rolling document and information is coming as we receive it. Just to have that in the same section I'm wondering if that might be helpful, just saying this is what we have so far, but as we get information, more is coming. That way we can keep the vagueness with still answering as many questions as we can and reminding people that when we're able to come up with a more solid plan, we will.
I think that makes sense. To me, it's just like, if we don't have, we have that section 2 right below it for the fall rehearsals and stuff. We have that very vague, which is fine with me. It would seem very odd that we have guidelines, or I guess guidelines is the right word for contests, when we don't even have a guideline yet for how we're going to prepare for contests.
Well, I think that we also need to, I think it's our responsibility not just to look at this from the contest host point of view. I think we also, as Jeannie said, we need to look at this from the administrations and the state point of view. But I think we also need to look at it from the parent point of view. And I think some of the parents may be concerned that there's not, I mean, they want to know something is in place to take care of their kids as well. I mean, I understand, and of course I'm not a contest host, and that's been something that I've thought of all along. Who in the world wants to host a contest where they're paying for all this stuff and they don't have any money coming in? But I think we've also got to make this guidance not only for the directors, but to show the outside world that we are making these considerations. And Darren Abram texted me just a while ago, and he said, we've also got to consider the less we are prepared, the more somebody else is going to make those decisions for us.
It's always the concern, yes.
That is the whole point of this document, is to try to get something rolling, as Michael mentioned, so that someone else doesn't tell us what to do. So the quicker we get this done, the better. And so I see where John has added under contest, to follow is the best KMEA has at this time. This guidance will in all likelihood change as the summer progresses.
Basically a disclaimer.
Yeah. Other comments?
Well, I know talking with some of the administration at my school in terms of what are the plans for this upcoming school year, I've been told that as of right now, they're still planning on going. Nothing's been said in terms of we're going to do anything different, that we're planning on going and moving forward. And, I'm not as versed with the KHSAA document, but what specifications does it have in terms of this is how a football game is going to go? We're going to do this during the game. Does it just go on, we're doing all these things for all these practices, and then once the season starts, everything's kind of normal? I worry that we're trying to do too much. And I understand the concerns of if we don't make these decisions, someone else will make them for us. But is everyone else, other than us, operating under the, we're doing these things now leading up to the events, and then once the events take place, it's business as usual? I guess that's a question I have.
I don't quite understand the question. I'm sorry, Curtis. Who thinks that things are going to be business as usual in the fall?
I'm asking in terms of the KHSAA document, how detailed is that in terms of how an actual football game, their event, will be conducted in terms of the safety? Does it go into great detail like we're trying to do now for our event?
I can't recall.
The guidelines that Bashir put out they only go through this July the 12th thing. I think that's what KHSA is operating under as well. The only reason they mention games and stuff at all is for those low contact, the baseball and those kind of things. I don't believe for football they're allowed to have any kind of competition at all through this. It's all just dealing with practices. So they haven't addressed anything related to back to school. Actually, I think in that article that just went out, I think the KHSA president said something along the lines of they're hopeful, they're confident, optimistic that it'll happen, but they wanted the superintendents to worry more about getting back to school than they were about sports. I think that's one of the quotes from Tackett.
Yeah. Sounds like him.
So are we okay with leaving this as it is right now? It's pretty it's
Thank
still
you.
pretty broad.
Your committee is split on that, I think, Tim. I think it's fair to say that, I think I think Grant and Curtis might say, can we just take it off? And somebody else might say, it doesn't hurt to leave it. So you got, I think you have mixed reviews here.
Well, I think in this particular case, maybe we need to have a motion and vote on it then. Would someone like to make a motion that we remove all information under contest?
I motion and leave the disclaimer that more information will come.
I second that.
Okay. Austin makes the motion. Michael Stone makes the second. The way we've done this in the past, and I don't know if we need to go around the room, if we can just do, if there are no objections. Let me start with, are there any objections to this?
We've got at least one, Tim.
Yeah, Beth is expressing an objection.
Okay, so then we need to go around the districts then and get a vote here. So the motion is to eliminate everything under contest except the disclaimer, which says to follow is the best KMEA has at this time for contest. This guidance will in all likelihood change as the summer progresses.
And I think that disclaimer would have to change because that refers to things that come after and there won't be anything after.
Yeah.
But we would need to come up with a wording for a disclaimer.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
All right. So we'll go around the room, and a yes means that you are in favor of eliminating the information on contests. A yes means you are in favor of eliminating. Okay. District 1.
I vote no, and I vote no because I think it's better to start harder and ease up than start with nothing.
District 2.
Yes.
District 3.
Yes.
District 4.
Yes.
5.
Yes.
6.
Yes.
7.
Yes.
8.
Yes.
9.
Yes.
10.
Yes.
11.
Yes.
And 12.
Yes.
Okay, so the information under contest will be eliminated from this document. We need to reword the disclaimer up here at the top.
I would suggest adding contests to point number 2 at the bottom of page 9. Contests, comma, fall rehearsals and travel, and using that disclaimer. Forthcoming will be guidelines for contests, fall contests, rehearsals, and travel, and included in there.
Sorry, I'm happy to do that. I'm just trying to put a strike through here. Where'd it go? I used to know how to do that. Oh, here we go. It's under text. Strike through. Okay, so I want to save that language for possible use later. That's why I'm not just deleting it now. And I'm sorry, David Centers, what did you say?
We could add it to the second point at the bottom of page 9, where it says fall rehearsals and travel. Could be fall contest rehearsals and travel. And then it says forthcoming will be guidelines for fall contest rehearsals and travel to be informed by the guidelines and et cetera. Do we need fall? Because some aren't technically during the fall.
Oh, well. We could say after school starts if we wanted to.
Contest rehearsals and travel after school begins or something to that sort.
Okay, that sounds
Next,
doable.
yeah, forthcoming will be guidelines for contests, rehearsals, and travel.
In that first line, John, you need to put contest.
Okay. Good enough.
Okay. Everybody good with that? All right. Last part of the document, hygienic. A, illness reporting. Create notification process for all event participants, directors, event staff, media, spectators, and vendors if the organizers / medical personnel learn of suspected or confirmed cases of COVID-19 at the event. I'll go ahead. B, considerations for adjudicators, directors, other personnel. Number 1, vulnerable individuals should not participate in any practices, conditioning activities, contests, or events during phases 1 and 2. We've already established that earlier. Number 2, masks may be worn, social distancing enforced, and hygiene basics adhered to in all situations. And then C, hygiene basics for directors, instructors, and students. I think we can go ahead and finish this out. Continue to practice good hygiene. Wash your hands with soap and water or use hand sanitizer, especially after touching frequently used items or surfaces. Avoid touching your face. Sneeze or cough into a tissue or the inside of your elbow. Disinfect frequently used items and surfaces as often as possible. Strongly consider using face coverings while in public, and particularly when riding buses. People who feel sick should stay home. Do not go to work or school. Contact and follow the advice of your medical provider. And then under other considerations, wide availability of hand sanitizer at contests and practices. Participants, coaches, and officials should clean hands frequently. Number 2, wiping down equipment frequently. Number 3, no handshakes or high fives or fist bumps. Number 4, adjudicators and volunteers should be given the option to wear face coverings. Okay, so that covered from hygienic on down.
I think we need to change coaches.
Oh, yeah.
And officials, I mean.
Yeah, that's a sports thing.
Mm-hmm. Even though I'd always wanted to get paid like the coaches, but it didn't happen.
I'm a little confused by the numbering. 3, hygienic, going up 2, contests. Number 1 is way at the top of the document. I think it just needs.
Yeah, there's something there, David. I agree with you. The outline form has lost its way a little bit, and that needs to be straightened out. I'll see what I can do.
Anything else from anybody? Oh.
Yeah, just a couple of people from my district asked for clarification on the mask throughout the different phases. I guess just more specific as to when they are not required as relates to indoor, outdoor. I'm just trying to clear that up for them.
Okay, I don't know about everybody else, but you were kind of cutting in and out on me there, and I didn't quite catch everything, every word that you said. Did anybody else hear Jason more clearly, or you want to try again?
It was a little sketchy.
Okay. I just had several questions from my district about masks. I guess they just were asking for some clarification on specifics about the phases as to when or when not they are required to be used.
When masks should be used during the different phases of the limitations, indoors and outdoors.
Yeah, I think that, did we not address that? Is it not in there that even when they're outdoors and they're not playing, they should have their masks on? Did we address that?
Maybe.
Rehearsals may have been way up there. Let's see.
Sometimes it's called cloth face coverings, so it's hard to search for.
Okay, I'm looking up at page 3 under points of emphasis.
3D.
Yeah, it's a pretty general comment, and I don't know if this answers the question or not, Jason. In the absence of guidelines to the contrary, we recommend that cloth face coverings be worn by students during phases 1 and 2, as outlined below. Cloth face coverings may continue to be used during phase 3 when not engaged in rigorous activity. Okay.
Yeah.
Did we specify in phase 1 and 2 when and when not to wear masks?
That's what he's asking. I think that seems to.
Under points of emphasis on page 2, you have to go on to page 3. It says physical respiratory protection such as cloth face covering should be worn whenever people are within 6 feet or 2 meters of each other. That's specifying whenever you're closer than 6 feet, mask on.
Yep, that answers the question. Does that help, Jason?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything else as far as the document goes?
The hygienic section is a little confusing in terms of, is that talking about, it still has a contest vibe about it. The word events, and I don't know. I don't know if that needs to be looked at to be cleared up in here or not, but it's all good
What
stuff.
page? What page?
The very bottom.
10.
10.
B1, is that what you're talking about? 3B1.
Well, it's about events. Is where it starts off. And our contests are our events. And so that's what sets up what Curtis is observing.
Well, what if we said vulnerable individuals should not participate in any activity during phases 1 and 2?
That is said up in the limitations. That's pretty clear elsewhere.
Well,
already.
I mean, there are other places where we repeat things, but under considerations for adjudicators, directors, and other personnel. Of course, if we're not saying anything about the contest, we can take out adjudicators and just say considerations for directors, other personnel, and then repeat that again.
I think the wording is changed here because it was specifically to be for contests. I think that's why. Above it addresses staff members and students, and here it's addressing extended beyond that because of the situation being for contests. And that's my understanding of where it is in the document. Those who put it together maybe can shed more light on that. But
yeah, well, this came from
NFHS.
the National Federation, I think. Could it be that this hygienic stuff then goes, without having to hopefully take a huge vote or whatever, that it goes along with the other contest stuff in terms of weighting, since it seems to be event specifying?
that's what it seems like it's reading in this and why it's there. It's following up with, okay, at contests and events, this is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've already
so
addressed
maybe,
it. Yeah.
Maybe we can save it for later. I'm okay with that because it really is that, and that was Curtis's observation and a good one, I think.
Does anybody have an objection to temporarily omitting that or deleting that? Okay.
Looks like we're okay.
All right. Okay. Pardon me for looking over here. I need to open up something here. Okay. Well, that, as of now, concludes our discussion of the guidelines document that will hopefully be formatted and be ready to go out. John, did we talk about the idea of we now disseminate this to everyone in its form? Are we still opening this up for questions and answers between now and a very short time? Our goal was to try to get this out Monday, if at all possible.
It was. I suggest that this afternoon and over the weekend, there may be some other questions that we're just not thinking of that someone gets once they read through it. It takes a little while to digest things. Some of those may be easy to take care of and just so obvious that I can just put it in. Some of it might be where possibly the ad hoc committee, we may want to try to pull them together and fool with anything that's a little tricky. But it's a rolling document and we can release it in the best form we have on Monday, where it looks good and makes sense and the outline form is fixed and things where it looks professional. And also I think some people have suggested that the bullets be changed to numbers of some sort, numbers or letters, so that it's a little easier to point to the correct bullet, because some of those have like 10 bullets. I mean, gosh, you can't find it. That kind of thing, just cleaning it up. And then we go, and that's a starting point. And then it'll change and improve as we get more input or get more really good questions that we just didn't think to address. I'm ready. I'm ready to send it. I think everybody's asking.
Right. And this not only will be sent out to directors, but in its final form will be sent to the governor and the commissioner of education. And I think the most important message here is that there will be changes made, and we'll react as we need to, as situations present themselves. So if there's no other discussion on this document, I do have one more section in the agenda that's really for discussing just about anything that maybe we didn't miss. One thing that I want to mention that I had written down, and someone else I think mentioned it in a chat, was, and this would actually be new business, but I think it's a topic of discussion. You know, we're limiting the minimum amount of time on the field for the each week's contest now, and it's also been asked and posed that should we limit the number of sanctioned contests required to qualify for SMBC. So I just want to, if it's not going to open up a big can of worms, I would like to jar open the top of that can just a little bit and get some insight and some opinions on that.
I hope that most of you have had an opportunity to look at the survey, and the comments are the most telling. So you read through those comments, and the very first one comes from somebody over here on my end of the state who is in Jenny's situation too. There are no contests over here, and if it ends up that they have to travel 3 hours, 4 hours to get to a contest in order to hit the 2 contest minimum, that might just knock them out of the state marching band championships because of the money thing, you know. And if you read through those comments, there's a lot of that same sentiment about dropping the two contest requirement this year and just going to 1.
Well, I also think if we have a problem with contest making, you know, because maybe there are bands that are in quarantine, or because, you know, we have to go to NTI for a little while. I think we've got to consider that. I think that's a real possibility. And so I really think that we need to drop that.
Is it the little devil's advocate on the thing where we don't want to even put, contest into this document we've just finished wrapping up? Is it possibly too early? We don't know for sure about the bus guidance yet, which is a big hanging up point for people, whether they'll be able to do this thing or not. We don't know about the contest venue capacity guidelines, which is going to dictate whether contests can make or not, and whether there won't be enough contests to go around almost. If either of those things happen, I think absolutely this is a good way to compensate for it. However, we don't know yet, and that's probably an easy,
Can't hear you, John. Nope. Now, say something.
Now.
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah. Okay, we've exceeded the capacity of my AirPods. So anyway, it's a pretty easy decision to make. And I don't think it's one you got to do 2 readings on or anything like that. It's an emergency thing. And
that was my question.
Yeah,
we can decide this pretty quickly if we need to.
When the time comes, I don't know if I'd shoot it off right now. It might be like calling school off and then it doesn't snow. And we actually hope. I think it's going to snow. I get it. I really kind of do, but I don't know any more than anybody else does. So just a thought. There's no panic. There's no rush to do this, but maybe we should let everybody know we are holding that as a strong possibility if the busing and the stadium capacities are reduced.
I think it's definitely something we need to let people know, because like Terry said, when you look at the contest list this year, this side of the state's just out in left field. I mean, I was always used to traveling 3 and 4 hours in one direction to go to a contest, but I mean, it's bad this year as far as the amount of travel that bands on this side of the state are going to have to do. And the fundraising is zilch right now. So,
Yeah, we do know that. We do know that some bands don't have any money after a dead spring. That's already a problem. I get that.
Tim, what we might do for the July meeting is have a list of things, maybe emergency protocols, things that we know we may have to do, like waive the 2 contest thing, waive the thing about entering a contest and then pulling out without a penalty, because that's going to happen. So somebody's going to sign up for a contest and then too many kids get sick and they can't attend. Just maybe put a list of things together that we anticipate we may have to do for this 1 year, and have that ready to at least discuss, if not pass, in that July meeting. But just to communicate to the membership that we know it's going to have to be different. And maybe one of those things, Pauletta, is that we reopen. Maybe there's somebody on the eastern part of the state, if conditions improve enough, that would be willing to host something to help these transportation issues things.
That's a good idea. It's a good possibility. Yeah.
On the dropping, I'm sorry.
Just one other thing, as a fundraiser thing out there, has anybody started already to get the school emblem on your mask and sell those as a fundraiser? I would.
Just an idea to us and the 40 some people that are watching the YouTube.
I just
quickly
on this.
be the first one on your block. So on the dropping of a contest, if you can't go because everybody gets sick, we already do that, by the way. They just have to ask, and Tim has the authority to say, "Oh, okay, forgiven." So that you're right. That's going to happen.
So I'm going to follow up on David Graham's suggestion that at our next meeting, hopefully our current document is in place, and it may need a little tweaking, or things might have changed where we may have to change the wording and resend it. But I think the impetus for our next meeting needs to be, as David said, what are the next things on our list that we need to be thinking of? What if this happens? And maybe by then we'll have a little bit more information. But so having said that, are there some other things that right now, while we're here together, that are items that you think we need to be discussing? I'm going to start the ball rolling just real quick here. Before this morning, before I read the news that there's a really good possibility, and I'm hoping it happens, that buses will be able to move in full capacity. That's a great thing. That's a revenue helper for everybody involved. But one of the things that I know some other schools are already taking strides in preparing for is, for example, having parents volunteer to drive their student or their child or their children to the contest. These are backup plans in case the busing thing does not work out. We've talked about the distance of how far bands have to travel, and that may play into the limiting the number of sanctioned contests, but also there's the possibility of, and I hate to put it in these terms, but if indeed, let's suppose it's half capacity on buses and you have to take twice as many buses, well, then maybe the solution to that and helping is to go to half as many contests. I know that's kind of blatant and hard to hear for contest managers, but it is an option. So that's one of the things I just wanted to mention. The other thing I want to get in while I think about it is, at some point, is it within our rights, and I'm asking this to everybody, is it within our capability and our rights to actually suggest to the governor and to the education department a plan to allow fans to come to our events? I guess I'm asking that as a rhetorical question right now, but if anybody wants to pipe in, they can. But I'm just wondering if we at some point can say, all right, we have a plan in place. We really need to have fans in the stands. We have a plan that will allow social distancing at our stadiums. We threw out the idea, or threw around the idea, I should say, of because we're on a classification system, we can shut down between classes and move people in and out so that there's not as many people in the stadium. So I just want to throw that as a question of what we might be looking at our next meeting. So that was kind of a rant and all over the place, but I think that's the impetus of our next meeting needs to be addressing things like this. So if anybody else wants to pipe in, please do.
Tim, you're going to set a date here for the next meeting?
When is July 4th? What day is
July.
that? July 4th. What day is that?
Saturday.
Saturday.
So Monday, or you want to go? You want to keep it on a Friday? You want to go in the middle of the week? Someone throw out a date. It needs to be toward the first week sometime.
How about the 7th on a Tuesday?
Anybody have objections to July 7th?
I mean, I would imagine some people might already be started with rehearsals by then.
That's a good point.
Would it be better to do it on a Saturday? The Saturday would be the 11th?
Okay.
I'm gonna take a guess at this, but I'm guessing that our meetings will be substantially shorter in these coming meetings. At least I'm hoping anyway. Because we have so much information in place right now, it's just a lot of tweaking and then maybe addressing how we'll deal with changes that are made. July 10th, Saturday, July 10th. Any objections to that?
11th.
11th? Is that 11th?
Yeah.
Okay. Saturday, July 11th, 10 a.m. Eastern time.
Thank you.
Is everybody good with that? Okay.
If there's nobody on the committee who's starting their band camp that day, then it should be all right to consider Tuesday staff. I certainly, some people maybe, there may be a couple of people here that teach who have a Tuesday issue. That's just a question you might check before you settle it.
Okay. So John is saying that if none of you that are on the marching band committee have something going on that Tuesday and would be available Tuesday morning, July 7th, we can have it then.
I do. We're already start. We start on that Monday before that.
We probably will. This is Patrick.
Okay.
Everything's a go.
Okay, so I think that answered our question then. So let's stick with Saturday, July 11th then at 10 a.m. Okay. Now,
Tim?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I know this has been a long meeting and everything, but I really, on my heart, I know that I've heard from a lot of band directors, and I know this isn't necessarily maybe marching band committee's place, but I know that there's a lot of different people with our association on this meeting, and I just wanted to voice a concern that I know that there's a lot of districts that are in their plans to come back, and I understand we've got to do what we got to do, and student safety is paramount and all that. But I know that there's a lot of band directors that are already being told that they're probably going to be proxying classes and they can have band after school. And I'm really concerned about our band programs, the life of them, if it's only relegated to after school. I'm just imagining in my own situation trying to do something in terms of 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade band. And I know that marching band is one of the most visible aspects of a lot of our programs. And a lot of people could say, well, yeah, you could have marching band after school and that takes care of everything. But in terms of the lifeblood of our programs, being relegated to just being able to do stuff after school, I'm really concerned. And I just hope that our association is making plans to be proactive and reaching out to superintendents and everything to keep that in mind as we go, in terms of, if I don't have middle school band for this upcoming year, unless I just do stuff after school, I know it would be extremely detrimental, and it would take years to get our program back to where it was prior to all this happening. So I feel it on my heart to say something about that, and hope that there's a lot of people on this meeting that have a lot to say in terms of our association. And I just hope there's plans in place to help guide and educate some of our districts in terms of maybe some best practices to ensure that our programs can still be vibrant during this tough time.
That's a nationwide concern, Curtis, and it is on the talking points of every of these meetings that I am asked to attend with the National Federation. It's a pretty widespread. Brad Kent from Texas is on those meetings regularly. People from all kinds of states. The president of the National Association, NAFME, is on there all the time, and there's a lot of discussion and concern about that. We did this marching band thing, of course, because marching band happens first. But right following on its heels, we've got to get into and address classroom music instruction, especially the performing, the band, choir, and orchestra, guitar ensemble, those kinds of things where you have lots of kids that you want to be in the same room at once. And I think so much depends on that study, which I just keep saying, but and that's a whole month away. We sure wish it wasn't, but I'm glad you said it. I really am. That is got to be next, because we and people in Kansas and people in Pennsylvania are worried about their music programs being turned into some sort of after-school activity, and principals say that wasn't so bad. Let's just keep doing that. I don't think it'll happen much. It probably will happen somewhere, and we want to keep it down as low as possible.
Tim, I think we also, those of us that were not on this committee that put this thing together, we need to tell you guys what a great job you've done on this document. And when I read it yesterday, I was stunned at thinking how much forethought and effort you guys put into this. So thank you. And I'll just say that on behalf of all the members of KMEA, not just the folks that are here, but all the band directors. I think this is a great start. So.
It's a start. More to do, but it's a start. Thank you, Terry. Before we adjourn, is there any other discussion anybody else wants to bring to the committee?
Just wanted to say I appreciate all the work you guys have put into putting in the document. It's pretty awesome that you all did that so quickly.
Well, hopefully this will ease some band directors' mind, or maybe make them a little bit more frustrated. I don't know, but it's as we said, it's a start, and hopefully it's in a positive direction. Anything else? Okay, well, this somewhat quote unquote finalized document will be coming out officially, hopefully sometime next week, and we will move on from there. If there are no other discussion items, is there a motion to adjourn?
Smith.
I'll second.
Okay.
Good.
Do we have a motion in a second?
Yeah. Smith and Striblin.
Oh, okay. Smith and Striblin. Okay. Any objections? If not, we'll see all or most of you back on Saturday, July 11th. Thank you so much for participating. Really appreciate what you all do. Take care.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.